Okay, good evening. So obviously a very busy sports news day. Two major stories have been making the sports headlines today in the UK at least. The Leicester Tigers salary cap breaches, and I've discussed that in video and discussed my thoughts on the situation and how Premiership Rugby and the RFU have dealt with that. And Chelsea's initial request to play their FA Cup tie against Middlesbrough behind closed doors, which they have now retracted. There's also ongoing issues about Chelsea's operating license, which expires on May 31st, and we don't know what happens post May 31st. Obviously, Abramovich put the club up for sale. He'd actually, which is not new news, he'd been open to offers for several years. Obviously, that sale was suspended due to the government sanctions against Russian individuals and businesses linked to the Kremlin. So Chelsea have been granted a special operations license. That entails a whole host of economic sanctions against the club, such as the club shop being closed, no new ticket sales, no fans in attendance, etc., etc. And the club sale has been put on hold. There are two interested parties. One is a Saudi-led consortium. One is a British-led consortium. And make of that what you will. Um, and so when they applied to the FA to have their upcoming FA Cup tie away at Middlesbrough play behind closed doors. Um, Pretty much everyone except Chelsea fans, clubs and fans and media commentators were like, no. So they've withdrawn that request because it's pretty unpopular. And there are actually quite a proportion of Chelsea fans who disagree with it as well. Why should they punish other clubs and fans for what's going on at their club? Um, They've had sponsorships terminated by sponsors, have withdrawn their sponsorship. There is ongoing issues with club travel arrangements, club you know uh, hotel arrangements for away games, etc., etc. So that is an ongoing situation. Whether Chelsea go into administration next season or not, as well as another one. On the Leicester Tigers front, very similar to Saracens, they were both breaching the salary cap at the same time, and I'm very surprised it's taken as long as it has to expose Leicester's breaches. It makes me wonder how long they've actually been under investigation for. This hasn't obviously just happened overnight. And when Saracens got caught, I did say that I'm not naive to think that other clubs aren't doing it. We know other clubs are doing it. It's just how and when they get caught. Leicester have got caught. There's still a fair few clubs that I believe are probably breaching the salary cap in some way. And if and when they get caught, what will their punishment be? I don't think the punishment for Leicester Tigers, given the precedent that happened with Saracens, fits the crime. If Saracens were dealt with in a similar manner, then that is an equal punishment. Um, Saracens were dealt in a harsher manner, and therefore, in my opinion, the punishment doesn't fit the crime. I think the punishment's been too lenient, and some would argue Saracens' punishment was too harsh. But that's and some argue that they should have been stripped for titles as well, and it wasn't harsh enough. So it's already creating debate. Obviously, they've ring fenced the Premiership for a couple of years, it seems, which again poses the concern that clubs will just go, we can breach the salary cap, we're not going to get relegated like Saracens did. I feel it's unfair for those clubs that are obeying the rules, and it's unfair for those clubs in the league below that in the Championship that wish to get to the Gallagher Premiership and compete at the top level. There are a couple of clubs that I think would be a boost for rugby union in this country if they were to play at the top level, and then there's that whole debate as well. So there's that to consider at this time. And so they're the two big issues going on. Also, with Everton and their links to Russian money, and Arsenal's and Bournemouth's, the Chelsea situation is not in isolation. Um, it wouldn't surprise me at some point if Everton, Bournemouth, and Arsenal, in some way, shape, or form, are also impacted by the sanctions against Russian businesses and investors and individuals. Now, Chelsea, obviously, because of Abramovich and his takeover in 2001. Simon Jordan summed it up very, very well on Talksport the other day. And I don't often agree with Simon Jordan, but he was spot on in his comments. Um, sports washing is the term, and you can also look at the Newcastle takeover. You can look at Man City's ownership. You can look at any foreign ownership, PSG, for example. Some of the TV deals and some of the TV companies with Middle Eastern and foreign investment. Um, so football and sport in general needs to look itself very hard in the mirror, and you know it has to ask harder questions about where the money comes from. For too long, professional sport around the world has turned a blind eye to corrupt, dirty money from corrupt owners or corrupt regimes or nations with a poor human rights record. But they didn't care where the money came from as long as the money came. And over the last 2 or 3 years, I think there has been a shift in public opinion. There has been a shift from fans, and questions are being raised in the right places about where the money is coming from. How legitimate are those funds? It's not just an English problem or a British problem, it's a global sporting issue. We've seen Olympics go to some countries and other sporting events go to some countries with some dubious human rights records. Um, and I look at the North American sports as well. They've been taking preseason games to China. They've had commercial links with the NHL with the KHL, for example. So the questions still remain, and the term sports washing is a thing. We know of the fit and proper persons test. It doesn't matter if the owner is a domestic owner or an overseas owner, but we've seen actual convicted criminals get control of football clubs. And I'm going to use two English examples: Sullivan and Gold with West Ham, and the Oyston family with Blackpool. They have been convicted of some very serious offences. Now, in Sullivan and Gold's case, the offences now would not be offences now. It was under the Obscenity Acts because they were known as the Dildo Brothers with their links to the pornography industry. But their offences now would not be offences now. There's a complete change in the attitudes towards the adult industry. However, are they still fit and proper people to run a football club considering the industry that they are involved in? The Oystons, dodginess there. You could argue when Cellini was in charge of Leeds, he's been convicted of tax offences, tax fraud and evasion in court in Italy in absentia. Um, he then sold his stake in the club, obviously. Milan Mandrić with his involvement in football. Mike Ashley, some of his business dealings have raised some eyebrows. He is a very cutthroat businessman, but some of his business dealings have been investigated under regulatory bodies to say, are they prim and proper? Of course, he's now out of Newcastle. The Glazers takeover of Man United. You can tell the different the moment that sports washing became a term. There's a time frame, and it's when Abramovich takes over Chelsea and when the Glazers take over Man United. That is when there's the shift in where money came from in English football, and then across Europe, that shift has continued. And at the time, no one gave a toss about Abramovich, and he went to the highest levels of government in this country. They were giving these golden visas to Eastern European oligarchs from the former Soviet bloc. The Glazers didn't even buy Man United with their money. They borrowed money from other people. They saddled the club with debt in a leveraged takeover, which, if we are properly enforcing the directors' test and the financial fair play rules, should not be allowed, regardless of if they're legitimate businessmen or not. And they had got a track record in sports ownership, so you could argue they have had experience in running a sports team, owning a sports team, having, with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But there were still question marks. There are question marks over the Khan family ownership of Fulham with some of their business dealings and issues of corruption there. And okay, they are Indian Americans, but there have been question marks over their business dealings as well. It doesn't matter if they're from a friendly nation to the UK or whatever, or from a country where there is clearly issues with corruption, human rights abuses, civil rights issues. But for too long, for 20 odd years, football and other sports have not cared where the money comes from, and but it's now the debate is we care, and I think what really sparked two things. I think sparked the debate and the discussion: the COVID pandemic and the European Super League, and to a certain extent the Golf Super League as well in the last 6 months. That really sparked the debate about finance in sport and where the money and the sponsorship and the backing comes from. Um, and there, it's been a passionate debate, but I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. And rightly or wrongly, I think the authorities have been very, very weak. They chased the cash over the sports integrity. Plain and simple, in my opinion. I think the sporting governing bodies globally have been more interested in maximizing profits over the integrity and the social aspects of their sports. And now it's massively backfired with what's going on geopolitically in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. And you know, there are going to be more eyes on foreign owned clubs and domestically owned clubs when it comes to the directors' test, financial fair play. And then the Premier League comes out and says, well, the directors' test didn't exist when the Glazers and Abramovich bought those football clubs. We brought them in the season after. It doesn't matter because you can still regularly, audit the owners of football clubs going, are you fit? Are you prim and proper? And I do feel sorry for the majority of fans. I do feel sorry for the players because it's not the players' fault. That's their profession. It's their job. They're paid to do a job. We are the customers. We buy their product. Um, it's not the players' fault. It's not the fans. It's not the fans' fault. It's not the employees at the club, from the tea lady in head office all the way through to the club shop workers, all the way through to the administrators who put together the pre and post match entertainment, to the mascots. It's sport for too long has not cared where the money's come from. And it's been in the satellite TV era. So since the early 90s, sport has not cared where the money has come from, as long as the money keeps flowing um, into league head office. And it's we've almost got hyperinflation with wages. Ticket prices have been, a cause of concern in recent years. Um, and look at the amount of clubs that are badly run. Doesn't matter if they're foreign ownership or domestic ownership. And as a Blackburn fan, I can tell you I've not been to a Blackburn game since the Venkies have been in charge. I used to go to Blackburn games, I think, twice a season. They would have to be away games because of where I live, but I used to go every season, at least a couple of games, and watch my team play and be happy to wear my jersey and buy the programs and support the team, win or lose. And get behind. I still support my team, win or lose. I'm very proud of what they're doing this season, even though the form has been a bit wobbly lately. I'm very proud. Our major sports are all corrupt: football, rugby, cricket, F1, boxing, obviously. Boxing's had issues with, and MMA as well, have had issues with corruption for years. That's nothing new. Individualistic sports like that, snooker, tennis has got an issue. Um, Boxing as well. Anytime you've got an individualistic sport, there are more options to try and fix the outcomes, especially in the lower rankings where there's less prize money available. Unless you're in tennis or snooker in the top 100 in the world, or top 50 or top 20, you're worth more. You get more sponsorship. The lower down the rankings you go, and the lower ranking events, there's not a lot of prize money. A lot of players literally just make enough to get from tournament to tournament. Yes, I did watch the Australian version of Panorama about 4 or 5 months ago. Four Corners, it's called, and then they basically discussed their domestic A League and suspicious ownership of football clubs in Australian football, or soccer, as they would call it, because rugby league and Aussie rules are also classed as football over there, in the slang terminology. So their third most popular domestic league. And they know it's not the biggest league in the world. They know it's not the most skillful or the highest quality, but there are concerns being raised. Um, and there's been some investigative journalism, and there's been, interviews done with the Australian FA and you know league head office, the A League head office, about, are we sure we want these owners investing in our sport when we have, domestic money, and people domestically who want to buy in, and grow the product to the domestic and overseas audience. And there's been the same concerns raised in Australia over the last decade as there have been in Europe. And again, it seems to go, very much under the radar, not talked about. And but reports have been, issued. State and national government have, you know, launched investigations and reports and recommendations. Independent investigative journalists have been poking around, asking questions. There has been concerns about the viability of clubs, the sustainability of clubs. Fans aren't necessarily over enamoured, whereas the NRL and the AFL, well, there are issues in aspects of their governance, and we could debate the shambles that is Australian rugby league governance in its history. Um, yeah, it is a great way to launder money. It's seen as a legitimate investment. You can make a lot of money out of professional sport, not just football. And this is not a new debate. This isn't like a debate that's happened overnight. It's just, this is not a, too hot. Very warm tonight. This is not, how do I put it? This is not a new issue. Basically, this is not something that's just happened overnight. This isn't just, an issue that's just only recently manifested itself. Corruption in football has been around for a very, very long time, and famously in Italy in 1980 there was a corruption bribery trial. Paolo Rossi, superstar of the '82 World Cup, sadly passed away last year, very suddenly, but uh, was implicated in taking bribes during the 1978 season. Um, you had the 2006 Italian match fixing scandal. There's been allegations of over 700 games in the last decade that are being investigated, um, in regards to spot fixing or match fixing, and suspicious betting patterns across Europe. There's World Cup games that are under suspicion. Famously in 1982, the West Germany Austria game, which eliminated Algeria from the '82 World Cup, is a prime example of a suspicious result. South Korea, Italy, in 2002. So these are not, new things when it comes to corruption within sport. And obviously, since FIFA and all that blew up, um, there's a lot less naivety, um, when it comes to fans, and journalists and investors, when it comes to dodgy dealings at the top level. We've seen the IOC as well, with the Olympics and issues surrounding several Olympic games. We've seen FIFA in regards to several World Cup bids. Obviously, the Qatar bid, we know it should never have gone there. Um, the most corrupt bid in history. Um, People were all right with Russia getting the 2018 World Cup, but this World Cup coming up, well, I will watch it, absolutely. I'm not going to deny that. I will be watching the World Cup because, firstly, it takes place near my birthday, or during my birthday takes place during the World Cup. So, book some time off work and watch as much of the tournament as possible. But most of the games will be in the evening anyway, so I shouldn't miss too many games in this upcoming World Cup. But I'm concerned about the quality of the product we're going to see on the field. We don't know what restrictions are going to be on crowds because of the pandemic, and every country's got its own restriction rules and mandates, vaccinated and unvaccinated, all this palaver. Ticket price is going to be very, very interesting, considering World Championship Athletics, which was classed as a test event for the World Cup, and this is before COVID, had very poor crowds. They had to pay people to sit in the stadium and make noise. And I'm not joking on that. They had to pay people because the first 2 days there was hardly anyone in the national stadium in Doha. The athletes were like, "This is really weird. There's no atmosphere. It devalues our product." Um, yeah, it's a vanity project, isn't it? But I think most sporting events these days seem to be vanity projects. In regards to this World Cup, it's now very, very interesting, considering what's going on with the Russia-Ukraine conflict and sanctions against Russian individuals, companies, and Belarusian individuals and companies and government officials, and how very quick the IIHF were, because Belarus and Russia are key members of the IIHF and very important members because they're two really big international teams when it comes to their World Championship program. They made FIFA look stupid, basically. FIFA said they've got to play in a neutral venue, can't sing the national anthem, can't they have to call Russian FA team. And then a few hours later, the IIHF, the International Ice Hockey Federation, were like, they're kicked out. We're going to replace them with two other teams for this upcoming World Championships from the divisions below, who, for whatever reason, would have missed out because of qualification relegation kind of thing. So they were very, very quick with no, even though some of the best players in the world come from these countries and have played in these countries, we're kicking them out. Russia's been stripped of its World Juniors Championship in 2023. Bang, we're on it. And then very, very quickly, FIFA U-turned on the decision to allow Russia to play in a neutral venue with no anthem and basically the athletes of Russia at the Olympics. And FIFA made it look very, very stupid, basically. And it didn't help that Poland came out and said, this is a cop-out. This is, not really a punishment. This is not causing pain, to the Russian regime on a PR standpoint, because it's a very soft sanction. We refuse to play. Their statement was absolutely brutal towards FIFA. And then Sweden and the Czech Republic were like, we stand with Poland. We also refuse to play against this opposition in the playoff, bracket to get to the World Cup. We also refuse to play against this team at a neutral venue. And then very, very quickly, FIFA will make it look very, very stupid. Bearing in mind, FIFA's already basically at loggerheads with the Swedish FA over the plans for a 2-year World Cup cycle, because the Scandinavian FAs have already basically said, we will boycott, we will withdraw, and the other UEFA federations at times said, actually, we also stand in support with our Scandinavian federations. And that's already a loggerheads, and FIFA are looking very stupid there. And so the quick U-turn by FIFA was embarrassing. Other sporting federations who are less well known or not as powerful globally financially, like the International Ski Federation, the Nordic Ski Federation said, doesn't matter, we're still banning Russian and Belarusian skiers, whereas the International Ski Federation said they can still compete and under a neutral flag. And they were like, we're not going to let them even land in Oslo or Stavanger or Bergen or Trondheim. If they land in our country, they are being deported. They are being denied visas, and we're not allowing them to compete. We're making a stand. I don't know what's happening with that. Rugby Union, World Rugby, Russia are a good Tier 2 nation. They're a solid Tier 2 nation. They've been kicked out of World Cup qualifying indefinitely. And people are, Russia's hardly a rugby powerhouse. They're not, but they want to be. That's the thing. They want to be, because sport is seen as a soft power negotiation thing. So FIFA got made look very stupid. Football seems to be very weak in governance, basically, at the top table. Infantino is just Sepp Blatter Mark II. Not a great administrator. Still linked to the old FIFA corruption. He was part of Sepp Blatter's backroom staff, so there's no real change there. You get rid of one corrupt Swiss guy, you put the guy from the next valley down in it. It's no real change in FIFA's direction. Um, in regards to um, upcoming tournaments, Russia could be in the sporting wilderness for years, and the only parallel I can bring in is South Africa during apartheid between the mid 70s till 94. South Africa during apartheid, and it did actually have an impact because that's when South Africa was producing world class talent, and when they were finally allowed to compete on the international stage, they're at the end of their careers. So it did actually have an impact, and um, you know, while a small impact, it did start changing public um, public opinion. Yes, they say that they could develop in isolation. That's fine, but they're not going to get that global advert for how skilled these players are because foreign scouts won't go there from the top European leagues in Western Europe, such as France, England, United Rugby Championship, the Georgian League, the Romanian League. Their scouts are not going to go there. Um, any, it's the same with Russia, the Russian football league. European club scouts will just not go there, and you won't see some up and like it. They basically so while they can develop in isolation, they're not going to be playing at the World Cup, which is when you want to put yourself in a shop window if you're a young up and coming player and you've been selected to play worldwide audience. So you've got expanding Major League Rugby where there's a lot of money being pumped into that. You've got the United Rugby Championship with the rebrand and with the South African teams joining on mass now, alongside the Italian, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh teams that are established. You've got the French league, which has got all the money. You've got the English league as well, which is one of the most. You've got the Super Rugby franchises in the domestic leagues in New Zealand and Australia and Japan. Their scouts will be going, well, we're boycotting this. We want these guys in the wilderness. So yeah, the Russian players will be pissed. If I was a young up and coming talented player in ice hockey, rugby, or football, I would be pissed because the money there domestically is not a lot, and you want to put yourself on the world stage to be scouted and selected, and then brought over to a better league where there is more money available, and your best years will be wasted, quite frankly. Um, and and that is a problem. That is a problem, and that's a fair few people you're pissing off there. And the ice hockey is the big one. The ice hockey is a big one. That is a one where I think it's Putin's favourite sport, and oh yes, absolutely. Teams are already withdrawing from the KHL. Dinamo Riga and Jokerit have already pulled out of the Gagarin Cup, and Dinamo Riga have gone. We are severing all ties with the KHL. We're going to re-enter our domestic league. Jokerit, it's uncertain whether they'll go back and play next season, although it's highly unlikely. The issue with Jokerit is sponsors are pulled out, and the ownership part of the ownership group that owns their arena in Helsinki is a Russian company, and so they have ongoing issues about, well, will they have to downsize arena? They will because they've been part of the KHL for a while, but sponsors are threatening to withdraw. Some sponsors have withdrawn. They aren't completely out of the KHL, if that makes sense. But they pulled out of this year's playoffs. Now, I think the Russian government have put pressure on the KHL to cancel the rest of the regular season and go straight to the playoffs, because they cancelled the rest of the regular season just before the invasion of Ukraine. That is very important. They claimed the Olympics was going to have an impact. However, the NHL, before they withdrew because of the COVID restrictions in China from the Olympics, had already factored that into their scheduling when they were going to have a league shutdown while the Olympics is on. So I find that one a bit suspicious and a bit of timing there. What's happening with the Russian players in the NHL? As far as they're still playing, Ovechkin's still scoring goals. Kuznetsov is still, Vasilevsky's still starting in Tampa Bay. Panarin's still playing, and Shesterkin is still playing for the Rangers, and Buchnevich. Svechnikov is still playing for the Jets, and the other Svechnikov is still playing for Carolina. Um, so in that regard, at the moment, the Russian players haven't had their visas cancelled. Now we don't know what's going to happen next season. I think that's, I think, what I think the NHL is clearly in negotiations with both the Canadian and US governments in regards to Russian players. What then happens to the draft in the summer will be interesting. If any Russian and Belarusian players enter the draft, that will be interesting. That will be very, very interesting. The European Hockey League. Well, I think the European leagues are already very well supported. Even in this country, they're very well supported. And ice hockey is the second most popular sport continent wide in Europe. So I think in that regard, I think it might put a greater emphasis on creating more and developing more homegrown talent in Europe. If the Russian players are to leave the NHL and not have their work visas renewed, when it comes to the draft, I think it may be an opportunity for more European players to get in the draft to fill the gap made by the Russian players. That is still uncertain. I've heard no reports saying their visas are going to be cancelled, but that is a possibility if the conflict continues. It's a complex issue. The World Juniors scheduled to take place next year in Russia is obviously now being. They're still yet to appoint a replacement venue, and they still haven't technically announced the two teams that are going to replace Belarus and Russia in the World Championships in May. So that's something else to again keep aware of and be aware of. I I think that's the sport that's going to be most affected globally. And also football to a certain extent with the qualifying games for the World Cup. They're the two sports that are most affected globally in regards to, you know, Russia being thrown out of both FIFA and IIHF having their membership suspended and they're not allowed to play in any sanctioned competitions. So that in that regard, it's already had an impact. In regards to, next season, we'll see. You've got the European League and the Champions League. They're basically the equivalents to the Europa League and the Champions League in football. The best teams in the domestic leagues enter, the competition, and it's a very similar, it's very very similar to Champions League and Europa League football. I think whether it means it gets a bigger profile or not, I don't know. But what I think that's not the conversation we're having. I don't think that's the right way to look at it. Beijing got the Winter Olympics in the bidding process. That's why the team was set up to try and improve the visibility of ice hockey in China and the level of the game in China. Whether it has or not is another thing. They're not a very good team. They never have been. They're bottom feeders. They never make the playoffs. They're there. They're like the Buffalo of the KHL, except they've never made the playoffs as far as I'm aware in their history. So there is that. But yeah, it's. I started off talking about the Leicester Tigers salary cap breach. We can circle back to that at some point. But yes, the sanctions against Russian sports leagues and teams and participation, I think it may have the same effect as the sanctions against Africa in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and early 90s during apartheid. Yeah, Kulin Red Star will still be a team. They've got like two Chinese players on the team. There's a lot of Chinese American and Chinese Canadian expats and ex NHL and AHL players playing there. So the participation of those players, and in fact all overseas players in the KHL, is now coming into question. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens really. But as I say, the unfortunate thing is we are where we are, In regards to the Chelsea situation, all at the moment, their special operating license runs out on the 31st of May, so they've only got 2.5 months until their future becomes exceptionally uncertain. As of now, they can continue working day to day on a shoestring budget. They do have enough funds to get through for another 2.5 months, so the players can continue to get paid. The issue is the shop staff in the club shop and you know stadium staff, because hardly any fans are going to be in attendance. They're the ones who are impacted the most right now. Now, whether they get given annual leave to take and voluntary redundancy payouts, obviously there's that economic impact on the non-playing staff. Again, I think that's unfair. It's not the club shop staff and the tea ladies' problem that the owner's a bit of a crook. And but this is the risk that football has been playing with for 20 years. Is at some point this was going to happen, regardless if it's Abramovich or the Glaziers. Dodgy owners will eventually get caught out, and if they're at a big club or a club that's been successful under their ownership, then the questions will be asked. Well, you didn't care where the money came from then. Why are you caring now? And I think, unfortunately, there's a proportion of Chelsea fans who are just a toxic element. I think every club has that. I've got friends who are Chelsea fans. I'm not knocking them. A lot of them have been Chelsea fans their entire lives since the Gianluca Vialli days, and the Dennis Wise days of the 90s, before Abramovich came along, before Ranieri was manager. I do feel sympathy for them. I do. But then you've got managers like Tuchel and Eddie Howe being bombarded with these questions about the club's owners. And they're like, I'm talking about my team lineup, I'm talking about injuries that we've had in the game, or suspensions, or I want to talk about the sport that we are involved in. I'm not, and they're getting bombarded with, the media are after them. I feel sorry for Eddie Howe and Tuchel in regards to their press conferences. And it's not their fault, They're employed in an already high pressure environment in a cutthroat industry anyway, and so it's going to be interesting to see again. Will the spotlight go back to Newcastle? Will it end up on Everton? Will it end up on Bournemouth, or any club that's got a suspiciously dodgy owner, foreign or domestic or otherwise? And at the moment, the popular club to hate, the fashionable club to hate, is Chelsea. Next week it could be Newcastle. Next week it could be Everton or Arsenal or Man, whatever ownership is under the spotlight for whatever reason. But look, I mean, not enough questions were asked at the time when he took the club over nearly 20 years ago. 18, 19 years ago, in 2003, 2004. Not enough questions were asked at the time. Same with the Glazers. They were allowed to leverage buy out that club, which, if it was to happen today, would not be allowed. Not enough questions were asked back then. Football did not give a damn where the money came from. And after those two purchases, we brought in the fit and proper persons test, which has been so badly enforced. As a Blackburn fan, I can tell you how badly enforced that's been. And you look at the clubs that have fallen foul of dodgy domestic or overseas owners that have been left in just a mess and have had unstable ownership and investigations into tax fraud and administration and threats of liquidation. It is annoying that professional football is so insistent with enforcing their virtue signalling, and I wouldn't call it virtue, I'll call it champagne socialism, or campaigning on social issues, when actually they've not looked hard enough at who owns, runs, and finances the game. And yes, crooks. There are some decent owners in football, and I look at Leicester City, I look at Exeter City, I look at some of the smaller clubs in the league. I look at clubs up and down this country at the lower levels, even in the Brighton. I think are a well-run club. Brentford, I think, are a club that are well-run. And then I look at clubs like Fulham and Chelsea, and I and Man United, Everton, Newcastle, the old ownership and the current ownership. I'm like, these people should be nowhere near a football club, and it's because of weak governance and greed. And Simon Jordan, if you look on the fans of the Alan Brazil podcast, someone posted his segment, his on the talk show on Talksport. And for once, I agree with Simon Jordan. I'm not a fan of Simon Jordan. I think he's a bit of a pompous, up his own backside kind of person. But every now and then he comes out with a lot of sense, and he has been involved in, being chairman of Palace, and he's been involved in the sport for a very, very long time. I don't agree with everything he says, but I understand why he says the things he says because he has experience in regards to getting deals done in football, whether they're good or bad. And he is right. He is absolutely right with how football didn't care, right? Didn't care. It did not care where the money came from as long as the money came in. And what exposed football and has really exposed football was not the financial crash about a decade ago. No, 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 no. It wasn't Brexit. No, 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 no. It was COVID. COVID exposed all this. And the European Super League. And people go, and a lot of Chelsea fans goes, but Roman, he put NHS workers up in the club hotel for free, and he did all this. It's called PR. Okay, it's called public relations. He has been caught on tape openly admitting in court when Boris Berezovsky was taken to court, like, yeah, he robbed a diesel train. Okay, he was part of an organised attempt or a successful attempt to steal fuel from a rival oil company for his own company. He has admitted to some very suspicious dealings in how he came to make his money. He defrauded the Russian government. A corrupt government being defrauded by a corrupt businessman. You couldn't make this up. He defrauded the Russian government. He ripped off his own country to make the money that bought him Chelsea. And so I have no sympathy for these whiny, vile minority of Chelsea fans who, if you look at the footage that circulated on social media of them, I think last season or the season before, and before COVID, at a European game in Europe, either in Spain or Italy, and they smash up this guy's cafe. The manager comes out, and then they start lobbing beer bottles at him. They've smashed up his shop front, and they start attacking him. 30 men. And they're proud of it. This is the same group of fans, the same fan base that racially abused a French local in Paris on the metro. So they are a toxic fan base with a very, very vile minority of fans, and that's why I don't feel sorry for Chelsea right now. I feel sorry for those genuine fans who follow the club before Abramovich, and I know a lot of them who followed the club when the club was basically out of money in the late 80s and early 90s, and they literally were on their knees. They were bust, and when you got Ken Bates as a chairman, he's not a nice bloke either. He was a dodgy crook. He still is. And I don't give a fuck about the slander. I really don't, because there's a reason why Chelsea were on their knees, and Ken Bates is part of it. I have sympathy for those past and present players who have played with the club. I have sympathy for the fans and the club staff. And we're not talking about the people in the boardroom. Bruce Butt, fuck off. I have sympathy for the staff in the club shop that have now been locked out of their jobs. I feel sorry for, the club administrators. I have no sympathy for the higher echelons in that club. I have sympathy for the lower level workers. I have sympathy for the kids in the Chelsea academy. I have sympathy for the club staff who work at the academy and the training ground in Chobham, which is only up the road from where I live. Right, I've got sympathy for the tea lady, all the way up to cleaning staff on that contract, the security staff who make sure it's a secure, site. The club chauffeurs, right? The club drivers who drive the players to and from press conferences. I've got sympathy for those behind the scenes staff, but I've got no sympathy for the higher echelons, and I've got no sympathy for a toxic fan base. None. Absolutely none. And I've got Chelsea fans who are friends. There are Chelsea fans who subscribe to this channel. And yeah, I've heard about the Chelsea takeover bids. One is from I think it's the cousin or the uncle of the Newcastle owner. And there's a Chelsea fan through and through whose wife is Holly Valance from Neighbours fame, by the way. I forget his name, but he's been going to Stamford Bridge since he was 4 years old. So that's 46 years he's been a Chelsea fan or something like that. And his wife is Holly Valance, so legend lad. He's a property investor. He works in property. He's a property developer, but he's not worth as much. And fans are complaining, but he's only worth about $1 billion or $2 billion. This could be the guy who saves your club from going out of business, and you're complaining, he's only worth a couple of billion. Oh, not enough. He could be worth £1 right now, and you could buy the club. And they're Candy is his name. And there are some fans on their. I follow their fan pages on social media because I follow a lot of clubs just for the channel, and there are fans crying over, he's only worth $1.5 billion, but this Saudi guy is worth 30 odd. He's still worth £1 billion, and that's not good enough. What the fuck is wrong with these people? This guy is a lifelong Chelsea fan. He's been going to Stamford Bridge since before a lot of these fans were even born. He's a season ticket holder, and he wants to buy his football club. And fans are going, he's only worth $1 billion. What the fuck is wrong with that fan base? Like, seriously, how deluded. They want the Saudi money. This guy has made his money legitimately. He's worked arse off for it. He's a local lad who wants to support his local club by buying them. Right? He's not going to leverage any debt on the club like the Glazers. He's not linked to a despotic regime who beheads people in public squares. He's not linked to a regime that's invading a sovereign nation in breach of an international treaty signed by said sovereign nation in 1995. We'll have to do that on the History Channel, the Budapest Treaty, because it's really actually important with what's going on right now and how we're in breach of it, Russia's in breach of it, and Ukraine isn't. Who would have thought? And there are fans whinging that he's only worth 1 point something billion. What the fuck is wrong with these people? There are even those within the Chelsea Football Club and players saying, "Please stop chanting Roman's name. It's making us more of a target." And they're going about how the media are like, it's because your fan base is so toxic, and there's always negative headlines coming out of Chelsea because of fan misbehaviour, racism, fans misbehaving, fans, smashing, they are. They're closet Fulham fans and Brentford fans, and Brentford and Fulham didn't want them in their fan base and tell them to fuck off. They are closeted Fulham fans, basically. Yeah, and I think this guy is genuine. He's created a lot of jobs in London and the South East with his developments. Whether you agree with some of these high-priced apartments or whatever, he has still created jobs in the building industry because of his developments, and in estate and letting agents have got jobs because of this man. He has created more than his own wealth for the economy with his companies. And there are Chelsea fans going, but we want the Saudi money. Really, considering this, Chelsea were one of those clubs that tried to block the Newcastle takeover. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Chelsea and Man City tried to block the Newcastle takeover because they threw their toys out the pram. Couldn't make this up. And now you've got a section of the fan base whinging that the guy's not worth enough money. At this point, I'm worth enough money to get Chelsea, right? I've got like 15 quid to my name. I could buy Chelsea right now. Because as it's a frozen asset, the club is technically worthless. I think these fans, better not bite the hand that feeds them. And I'm not sure the FA will allow another, under the current climate, that would, I'm not so sure that'd be a good idea. Yeah, of course they are. Of course they are. I went to school with one of the Chelsea players from the 90s, and his dad was a Chelsea player in the 90s. I forget the kid's name, but I've got his signed picture from the old Autoglass era, mid 90s. And no word of a lie, he wasn't sure if he was going to get paid from week to week at times. And I'm not joking, that's how bad Chelsea's finances were in the mid 90s. Yeah, they won the FA Cup against Middlesbrough and all that, and they had some really good players. But generally speaking, they weren't sure of getting paid from week to week. And I'm not even joking on that, or month to month. There were concerns that would they get paid on time. The club was basically on its knees, and now these fans are like, "Oh, this guy's not worth enough money." He's willing to basically put his reputation on the line to save his boyhood club, and that's not enough for these people. They are deluded. They are a toxic mess of a club, and yeah, it'll be the same with City and it'll be the same with Newcastle. I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked about several clubs and their owners in the coming weeks and months. And people go, but look what City have done for the City of Manchester. Yeah, there's a reason why they got that land so cheap. It's because the crime levels were so high, and it was called Gunchester for a while. But that area of Manchester was almost uninhabitable by people. Anyone who had any decency left the area long before they redeveloped it. The murder rate was the highest in the UK, apart from Nottingham at the time. Nottingham was called Shottingham for a reason, right? No one of any decent background wanted to live there. Families were moving away. So the property prices were dirt cheap. And because Man City were willing to invest in a deprived area, they got tax breaks from the government. What happens? And because they got tax breaks, they can write that off against tax. Who knew? Because the Moss Side area of Manchester was, and still is to a certain extent, poor. Newcastle, there's areas of the northeast in Tyne and Wear that I've got friends from up there, and yeah, they are generally poor areas. Deprivation, high crime, drug addiction, and Sunderland, Newcastle, Middlesbrough, Hartlepool, to those communities, regardless of where those clubs are in the league structure, that is an escape from their humdrum daily existence of low wages, high unemployment, deprivation, and it's an escape for them. Clubs are their community meeting points, regardless, and we're selling our community souls to crooks. Unless Man City did get a free stadium after the Commonwealth Games, like West Ham with the Olympic Stadium. And they can't even fill it, so there you go. Empty Etihad. They have to pump fake crowd noise in to create atmosphere because they don't fill all the seats. Ridiculous, that is. But I don't want this to become a rant. I try and avoid rants now on the live stream. I try and be quite calm and responsible when I answer your questions and we discuss topics. Because I have ranted on live streams in the past. They are some of the best live streams I've ever run, but I try not to. But as a Blackburn fan, with the Benkies, we ended up in League One. The season they took over, we were 10th in the Premier League. Within a few seasons, we are in League One. 2 relegations in 3 years. Now, I'm happy where the club is at right now on a playing standpoint. Okay? Admittedly, um, and where we are in the league is better than where we were this time last year by 6, 7, 8, 9 places. So I'm happy that the team is ahead of schedule. But we've had a decade plus of mismanagement and debt and division and instability. I'm not saying the Benkies are crooks. They're just not fit and proper people to run a football club. They work in their money's been made in the agricultural industry. They've never invested in sport before. Do you think the Panthers will finally live up to expectations in the postseason? Sure, by the way, going through some changes with my account. Panthers, 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 Panthers. There's only 2 Panthers teams I can think of. One's in the NRL and one's in the NFL. So I'm assuming we're going with the Carolina Panthers in the NFL. Panthers. Oh, Florida Panthers. Yes. Haha. Right. I've worked out which moderator this is. As long as players like Barkov and Bobrovsky are still with the team and there's no visa issues with the way they played the last couple of years, I think even with what happened with Joel Quenneville at the beginning of the season in the aftermath of the Chicago abuse scandal, which I felt at the time losing him could have derailed the team. They have responded well to losing Joel Quenneville behind the bench. They've obviously got a good roster, the depth, and they've taken that next step where they are a playoff team now. There's no doubt on that. They've just got to win that round. As soon as they win that playoff round, like Columbus, winning that first round, then the next step is already taken. I would rather they went in with no expectation because they haven't won a round since '96. But as long as they can win that first round, I would say that is a successful season and postseason. If they do go on a run, then they've then got to back that up next season. But they're playoff bound. They've got to get through that first round. They've got to win 4 games. And with how some teams' form has really dipped the last couple of weeks, and other teams are on. Look at the Arizona Coyotes. Where was this form? Imagine if they were playing like that at the beginning of the season, they would be, in a playoff place. It's ridiculous form they're showing. I bumped into a Montreal Canadiens fan yesterday, and he was actually Canadian. He was actually from Canada, and I was like, yeah, hey, because I obviously live in the UK. With my job being doing waste collection, garbage removal, as you would say, we call it being a bin man and taking household waste away. He was on his doorstep. He was talking to us. I said, I'm a Jets fan. He goes, oh, your season's gone a bit. I said, well, look, it's always been going a bit since 2011. But it happens. It's a down year, like injuries, retirements. I said, I'm not. I will still obviously support the Jets and hope they do well. But you're Canadians. What a tyre fire. And it was like, it happens. For once, I met a Canadians fan who wasn't toxic. He didn't, and I'm thinking to myself, why can't all Canadians fans be like this? He didn't say, oh, we have to be a French. He didn't make reference of, oh, the coach has to speak French, the GM has to speak French. I think he wants the best person in charge to do the job. And I think the Montreal Canadiens, their insistence on having a French-speaking GM and a French-speaking coach, or bilingual, is holding the team back. because the majority of the team are not French Canadian. It's a global game, and Jake Allen's been facing a firing squad all season, and he's a decent, solid NHL level goaltender. You know, the Carey Price contract is really aged badly now, and I was questioning at the time it was signed. He's like, this makes no sense. He'll be in his 40s when that contract expires. It's almost unmovable unless the salary cap shoots up, or a team like Arizona or a team like Seattle has loads of cap space next season. He ain't going anywhere. And I'm not sure Arizona, with the form they're showing in the last couple of weeks, want to finish bottom of the league. They want to, finish fighting. I think Seattle expansion team not as good as anticipated. Vegas obviously raised the bar, but they're still competitive. And Montreal, while they've closed the gap now, and in fact Arizona were below them for large portions of the season, Montreal are in serious trouble of, if Arizona keep up their winning streak and the Kraken stay competitive, they could be bottom of the league overall. That hasn't happened in the expansion era. Not since 1967 have Montreal been this bad. They've missed playoffs, sure, but they've never been this bad and this mismanaged. And there was times in the season where this could be the worst ever season ever, worse than the Washington Capitals in 1973-74. We're looking at historically bad, and this has got to be the worst Montreal Canadiens season since 1967, since the expansion era. I've never seen a Montreal Canadiens team this incompetent, disjointed, lost, ever. I haven't been following the Elite League this season. I haven't really been following British ice hockey at all this season. I just haven't had time with work and other issues. I never want to see a coach sacked in the season. At the end of the season, okay, you do a post-season review and go, wasn't good enough, we go in another direction. I don't like it when coaches and managers are sacked mid-season. I'm of the opinion that it should be done at the end of the season. Personally, in whatever sport we're talking. It adds a bit more stability, in my opinion. I have got an annoying bug, which is now dead, I think. If it wasn't dead, it's definitely fucking dead now. There's a bug on the wall. I'm of the opinion that, I don't like seeing coaches getting sacked mid-season. But every team does that post-season review. Whether they publicly admit it or not, they were like, okay, where did we finish? What did we do well? What did we do badly? Good results, bad results, player development, new signings, have they bedded in? Have the rookies had a good run? No. Youth development, they always have that post-season review. And then they plan for the next season and what their goals are. And if you haven't met the goals that you set out at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, if you were well below, the pass mark, if you're really down at the bottom, then look in a different direction. I don't like seeing coaches sacked mid-season. I'm not an advocate for it. But it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast. Some teams have more coaching stability than others, and more patient owners than others. Other teams, there's less patience, less stability, and ultimately less success. Who knew? So there is that to bear in mind. But in saying that, I haven't followed the results close enough and the league close enough to make an opinion on the Manchester Storm and their situation and their coaching situation and direction the team is heading, if that makes sense. Now, we have seen a lot of coaching changes in a lot of sports this season. And some clubs have gone through multiple coaches in a season, Watford being a prime example, for one. And Man United, Leeds, Newcastle, Everton. The only club in the bottom five of the Premier League without changing manager is Burnley. you know, um, and I still think Sean Dyche. I think his time at Burnley will be coming to an end at the end of the season. I think that's going to happen. Um, and look at those teams that have changed manager. They're not having a good season. Um, there is no denying that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Let's have a look at if any further news has come out about the Leicester Tigers salary cap breach, because that has really interested me. I wonder how long they've been investigated for. And this is where we have to ask questions about the direction of English rugby union at the domestic level, governance level, and the fact that this is the second salary cap breach from that era that we are aware of. It wouldn't surprise me if more clubs have been doing it, and if it's more widespread than they would like us to know. Because I'm not naive in that regard. Um, let's have a look. The Leicester Tigers have said they're not going to appeal. Their fine, ironically, their overspend isn't massive in comparison to how bad Saracens was. It's not. It's about 10% of the salary of value. But there's more coming out. Right. Comparisons with Saracens, who were relegated in 2020 on the back of their own salary cap breach, show a far greater overspend. We know that. We accept the decision and the acknowledgement that there was no overrun in the most recent season of the review. We are thankful this match has been brought to a conclusion and pleased that we can now focus of all of our energy and efforts on the future of the club. The Premiership Rugby salary cap director Andrew Rogers added, Leicester Tigers have cooperated with my investigation and accepted the findings, which allows us to apply the sanctions detailed in the regulations. That's a flaw in the regulations then. While we are satisfied that the arrangements which have resulted in the overspend have been brought to an end, we will continue to assess all spending as part of an ongoing monitoring process at every club. Well, it's still not transparent how they monitor and how they were tipped off on an investigation. The overwhelming feeling at Leicester and from their fans will be with relief. With Tigers 12 points clear at the top of the table, this investigation had the potential to derail their title bid or relegate them. But this is not a good day for England's most successful club historically. Tigers have been found to have systematically bypassed rules aimed at keeping the Premiership fair and competitive. And having incurred the second biggest salary cap fine in the division's history, obviously Saracens was the biggest. Tigers miraculously appear to have regularly overspent just below the limit. That could have led to a points deduction. Oh, that's just they pushed it where they knew they couldn't get docked points, or worse. Had they been investigated under current rules and not those in place at the time, they'd be in big trouble. So the rules have changed. This means they've been investigated for a while. Their reputation is significantly hit by this, and despite wholesale change in the boardroom and at coaching level since these breaches, some figures have big questions to answer. Okay, they knew what they could get away with basically under the rules at the time. So they were just below points deduction. I think points deduction should always be in place for salary cap breaches. So therefore they were deliberately aware of what they could get away with, regardless of what was happening at Saracens. They knew the rules and the punishments for each level of breach, so they were just below points deduction. So they knew what they were doing. That is deliberate. Whether the coaching setup has changed, and boardroom has changed, they knew what they were doing. And there are people still at that club who have not been sanctioned. So I find that a cop out by Premiership Rugby. Sorry, don't buy it. They knew that they were deliberately breaking the rules and they knew how to get away with it. which says to me other clubs are doing it as well. So I bet your whistleblower's done that. Same with Saracens, because Premiership Rugby didn't have a clue what was going on until they were given a tip off. So Tigers knew what they were doing. They made sure there were a few pennies underneath the threshold for points deduction. They knew what they were doing. And it wouldn't surprise me if clubs are in contact with each other going, this is how you break the rules, mate. If only football in the UK actually enforced their breaches, cough, Man City. Yeah. The thing is, I'm not against the City players being good and those genuine fans who've been there from the main road days and they were down in Division 3 and have gone through the tough times. And the club employees in the club shop, again, the tea lady at the training ground, that kind of thing. However, I'm not comfortable, and I've never been comfortable. I'm a Blackburn fan. I'm not happy with the Benkits. So, with suspect ownership, basically. And now the spotlight is actually going to be on, especially these foreign-owned clubs, or those clubs with businessmen in charge, and women who've got links to Amanda Stapley, to the Saudi regime, through their business dealings. Now, yeah, club ownership, and I can see several clubs being under the spotlight now, big time, in all the divisions. And I do urge you to watch the Simon Jordan bit on TalkSport. I generally urge you to watch what he has to say on it. And I don't often agree with Simon Jordan. Maybe I'm a bit too much of an idealist, but he hits the nail on the head. And there was a reason why Palace used to struggle and yo-yo between the Championship and the Premier League when he was chairman. And it's not because he didn't care about the club and didn't want the club to be successful. You just listen to what he has to say. And it sums up everything that is wrong with the sport, not only in this country, but across Europe. Sums it all up. Rugby actually punishes the big clubs a lot. You would think that, but Leicester Tigers were aware that they were breaking the rules and also aware of what punishments they would get. So they knew how much they could push the overspend before getting docked points, which in my view is probably worse than Saracens just going, fuck it, we're just going to cheat. Leicester Tigers knew they were cheating and then knew how to cheat further by going, we're just going to be just under that threshold for points deduction. We're going to be naughty, but we're not going to be too naughty. But we're going to be naughty because we know how to not be too naughty. I've turned it into a comedy sketch, but that says to me other clubs are doing this. They know what they can get away with without getting docked points and the fines being less. They know what they can get away with. And because the Premiership is now ring-fenced for a couple of years, they're all going to be doing it because they can't technically be relegated to the Championship. So Worcester, Bath, those weaker clubs, Bristol we know are breaking the salary cap. Look at the players they've signed, regardless of their form. Look at the players they've got on their books. It's ridiculous. We know they're breaking the rules. Now Premiership Rugby says they've strengthened the rules in regards to the Saracens, and technically they've obviously been investigating Leicester for some time as well, just not publicly admitting. By the way, another club's under investigation. Now, Leicester are the most successful club in English rugby union history. So two of the biggest clubs of the last 30 years have breached the salary cap. Now, these clubs sign up to the rules at the beginning of the season and then go and break them anyway. It's embarrassing that the sport clearly can't self-regulate. Cannot self-regulate. Independent regulator, please. If you're going to put rules in place and then flout them, because you have to sign up to agree to get your operating license, they don't care. Please give us a break. Give us a break. This is why I've lost faith in some of the. I mean, I'm more of a cynic now than what I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was young, naive, and full of hope. Hey, and actually enjoyed watching sport. We've sold our sports rights to the Murdochs for decades. Prem should have been given the fans majority ownership from the start. If all these billionaires in with their dodgy money and try and destroy football by creating their own league. I do believe fans should be on the boards. I do believe in the 50+1 rule. Exeter City do it very well. I mean, Blackburn used to have a lot of the fans' trust had a big. After Jack Walker passed away, we had a big say in how the club was run, and we just couldn't financially keep competing. Although, ironically, I think we could have with the TV deals that have now since been signed. We should never have allowed the Venkies to put a bid in for the club, really. I don't know why the Premier League allowed it, but they did because they didn't care where the money came from. And now suddenly they care because it's a social justice thing. It's popular to care. The Premier League is trying to do a PR exercise over the last month, right? They're trying to do a PR exercise. They're trying to cover themselves for 2-3 decades of basically being greedy and getting caught out with their greed. And the players haven't helped with their exorbitant wages. And again, Simon Jordan sums it up on TalkSport. It's actually embarrassing how he sums it up on TalkSport, Ric Flair. And it sort of explains why Palace struggled for so many years to establish themselves in the Premier League era. But Simon Jordan just sums it up. And I don't often agree with him, as I say, but right now I can't argue against with what he was saying. Now, yeah, the European Super League is basically what with the new Champions League format that we've got coming in. It's basically the European Super League, but with Champions League put in the name, and with more clubs involved. It's the format the Super League would have had. So ironically, these greedy clubs get what they want. Fans don't, by the way. Fans don't, but the clubs do. But yeah, I mean, the modern era, as I call it, so my lifetime basically is the sport has passed that crossroads now. I think mid 2000s it was already at the crossroads. Okay, maybe there should be a salary cap. I'll let them bring it back. Chelsea, have fun joining that. I don't think fans will tolerate it. I think the anger's there now. They've poked the termite mound. I'll use that analogy. They poked the termite mound, the ant's nest, the hornet's nest, the nasty stinging insects that are a bit venomous and could kill you. They poked and poked and poked, and yeah, we're not going to take it. Sorry. The PR disaster. I mean, look at Tottenham, trophyless again. Look at United, shambles. Chelsea might go out of business on the 31st of May. Come on, fuck with this Super League. To be honest, at this point, I couldn't care if all the clubs go out of fucking business and get reformed with us owning them. To be honest, let the club sign it because the reaction of the last time would say we don't want it. I would love to see all these clubs go under and then the fans buy back the rights to the image rights of the logos and then reform them. And I think the Premier League needs to be very, very careful. And these club owners just don't care. They don't care. They want to make money because they've run out of money because of COVID. COVID has exposed their reckless spending. And the lie that we as fans could go in for free and that we weren't actually financially important to the clubs on match days was a lie. Basically, the club said though they could let us in for a tenner or less, right? Which is where that pay-per-view sort of idea came from about this time a year and a half ago, a year or so ago, to cover losses, right? 2020, which fell flat very, very quickly and was a disaster. That was a lie, right? It was a lie. The clubs were cooking the books to make it seem like they were actually had deeper. They were spending out of their assholes, right? They were spending money they didn't actually have. Their expenditures were higher than their incomes. And if a lot of these clubs were standalone without these wealthy owners, they would not be financially viable. Barcelona approved that. Barcelona, who are actually owned by the fans, by the way, because the fans elect the presidents, are 1.3 billion US dollars in debt. They're not making enough money. Right? And if they go ahead with the revamped Super League, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Let them go. I don't even watch league football anyway. I didn't watch the FA Cup. And even then, I didn't watch any of the last round. Let them go. Because to me, the sport is unsustainable with the current business model that's in place. And Simon Jordan, again on Talksport, whether you listen to Talksport or not, listen to his piece. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. It's on the Talksport Facebook page. Listen to it. It's about a minute, 2 minutes long. They snippet bits out where they waffle a little bit, but he basically rips the Super League, club ownership, the FA, the Premier League. He rips an arsehole out of everyone. And I finally agree with him on something, which is a rare thing. Completely blows out of the water. So for 20, 30 years, we have been taking this blood money. We've and it's the public opinion has gone. We've had enough. COVID has exposed the greed of these clubs, the hypocrisy of it all, and they're on the PR defensive now. So it's all PR. Saying, "Oh look, look what we've done with the community." Man City got that land dirt cheap because the crime rate in Manchester was sky high, and no one wanted to fucking live in Moss Side because it was Gunchester, Nottingham, for example, Shottingham. Some of these areas with the Anfield Road, Stanley Park, Everton and Anfield, Goodison and Anfield. That area of Liverpool was so deprived. If you've never been up there, my God, it is depressing. It is crime-ridden, poverty, deprivation. And when Liverpool were putting our staff on furlough, fuck me. That didn't go down well, did it? You know, Everton wanting to move out of Goodison. I mean, that's been on the cards for about 20 odd years. Blame Bill Kenwright for that. And he's the previous chairman. And he was willing to sell the club to a Russian and an Egyptian guy with a dodgy track record, dodgy dealings. I couldn't care less if these clubs go out of business now. I couldn't care less. I really couldn't. Notice I've done no football videos lately. They might be the most popular videos on the channel for average viewership. Don't do any lately because I've fallen out of love with sport so completely with that sport is unreal. I'll be happy if I never watch another football game again. And it's how I feel. I'm that cynical about it now. I just don't care. The sport's soul and dignity and finances are a mess. The economics no longer work. People talk about West Ham getting a good deal on the London. They did get a good deal. And yes, Man City got a stupid arrangement for what is now the Etihad, which used to be the Manchester City Stadium, the Commonwealth Stadium. Yeah, they both got really cheap deals, and I bet you local government in both London, well, they've already tried and failed in court because guess what? The agreement stands up in court. Saheed Khan wants to rip it up and charge them more, and he can't because of the deal that's been signed, which was a great bit of business by West Ham, by the way. And he's a PR champagne socialist of a mayor. He comes up with all these PR things, but actually does very little in the mayor's office. Same with Manchester, with Andy Burnham. He has not questioned that deal for Man City's lease of the stadium. Not even close. Same party, another champagne socialist, and he's a Scouser as well. God, I don't know why Mancunians voted for him. God, he's a bin dipper. So as I say, for me, local government in Manchester and London are both culpable in being dumb enough, and I say this, dumb enough to undervalue the contracts for those stadium leases. So I've got no sympathy when shit hits the fan. And it's taxpayer money, our money, fucking paid for those stadiums. I don't see a rebate. It's the same with Wembley when they tried to flog off Wembley. There was taxpayer money involved in the redevelopment of Wembley, and then the FA would sort of and then um, Saeed Khan, the guy who owns Fulham and Jacksonville, the public backlash was such as we as taxpayers were like, well, fucking give us some money then out of that stuff because the FA halved the value of the stadium should be worth over £1 billion, and they were trying to flog it for 600 million. It was like you're undervaluing the asset because property prices since that stadium was opened in London have skyrocketed. And it's a shit stadium anyway, but still, taxpayer money went into the redevelopment of Wembley. Our taxes paid for that. I didn't went over budget, and it was right. Yeah, I've worked in Birmingham. My dad used to live there just south of Birmingham. I completely agree. Birmingham gets a shit deal. Um, Liverpool, I've got friends who live in Liverpool. I've been to Liverpool again, gets a shit deal. And at city council and mayor level, there's corruption there as well in regards to the Everton Stadium plan redevelopment on the dockside. Lost its UNESCO World Heritage Site, which means the city loses funding. There's dodginess at that council level. Oh, it's a Labour Party council as well. Surprise, surprise, you couldn't make this stuff up. The champagne socialists of the Labour Party, claiming they're for the common people, but they're dirty as fuck as well. They're on the take just as much as the Tories. And I hate the Tory Party, and I hate the Labour Party, and I hate politics. But yes, I couldn't agree more. Have you noticed all these cities have Labour councils, have Labour mayors, and guess what? In the planning departments and in the deals they have signed, crooked as fuck. Couldn't make it up. You could not make it up. And I've worked in Birmingham. I can definitely say yes. It is a city with a lot of deprivation. Some areas with high unemployment, especially youth unemployment, lack of investment. Although the Commonwealth Games is sort of changing that. um, I still think for certain internationals you want to stay in the home stadium, but other countries take games on the road round their countries for internationals. I don't see why um, national teams, be it rugby union and football, can't do what cricket do with have different test international grounds. Same with rugby league as well. I can't see why football and rugby union can't do that. Um, but it is what it is. And you look at the ticket prices. Fuck me, extortionate. And there was already complaints about the Wales France game on Friday last week, where there were 10,000 empty seats, and the cheapest tickets were £100. And the cheapest tickets at Twickenham on Saturday were £200 plus. Fuck off. Fuck off. If that was a rugby league international, there would be uproar. And there's already concerns about the Challenge Cup agreement with Wembley for the final. That's locked in until 2025, I believe. And when Catalan won and the final after were the two lowest finals since the war, and ticket price again was raised, and there were concerns about the agreement that the RFL had signed with Wembley and the FA. You couldn't make this stuff up. Sports governance in this country is a joke. The ECB are a joke. The FA are a joke. Premier League, the EFL, Premiership Rugby, the RFL, Super League, all a fucking joke. The English Ice Hockey Association, they wanted to there was talks about combining the Scottish, English, and Welsh ice hockey associations together to make an overall governing body. And two of the big, powerful clubs went, "No, we're not doing that. We don't want to be part of it." And so the talks broke down. Sports governance in the UK, you know, is an absolute fucking shambles. This is turning into more of a rant than anything. And then I look at the punishment Leicester Tigers get today. It's been announced, and fans are pissed because the Leicester Tigers knew what they were doing. They knew how to avoid a harsh punishment. They knew that they were breaking the rules, which they signed up to at the beginning of every season. They knew what they were doing. And then last season, they were late in declaring third party payments as well, and they get another fine. But they knew what they were doing, and they knew what punishments they would get, and that there would be a drop in the ocean for ownership and the sponsors and all that. And they would not get any points deducted because they also knew that the Premiership was being ring fenced because they fucking voted for it. Which means other clubs miss out on growing, developing, and then doing what Exeter have done. If you ring fence the Premiership, you don't get Exeter Chiefs. And the success story they have been on a much smaller budget, with a much smaller fan base, becoming a world class club. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that every single Premiership club, and to a certain extent in the Championship Rugby Union, they breach the salary cap. There is no doubt in my mind they all do it. But the fact that Leicester knew that they were just below the points deduction threshold, just below, joke. Joke. And then the Saracens ownership, well, look what we've done in the community. Look at like, fuck off. Fuck off. I'm done with it. Because there's a reason why the quality below isn't good enough. And it's because professionalism hasn't worked. And the trickle down economics doesn't work. It doesn't work in football anymore. Doesn't work in rugby union. Doesn't work in rugby league. Doesn't work in ice hockey. Professionalism in rugby union has failed. Super Rugby proves that. The South Africans withdrawing from Super Rugby and going into the European United Rugby Championship proves that. The Welsh club game proves that. Professionalism has been mismanaged since 1995. And Augustine Pichot, when he went to that World Rugby election just after the World Cup final in 2019, said this needs to stop. We need to fix the finances. We need to spread the money more equally. We need to have discussions with the unions. And Bill Beaumont stood on the status quo platform. Augustine Pichot feels like he's not been listened to. Bill Beaumont gets into office again, nicks all Pichot's ideas. Pichot goes, fuck this, I'm done. And you couldn't make this stuff up. Sports governance is a joke. Look at Major League Baseball with the salary cap or the lack of, and the lockout for 3 months. All they've done is, we'll pay the players a little bit more, and we'll fix it. All they're doing is in 5 years' time, the CBA will lapse again, if not before the players striking before, because the Players Association were not happy in total with the deal that was put on the table. The talks break down constantly. It's a mess. And the system is now designed to protect a couple at the expense of the many. Same with football. Look at the Super League. What a mess that is. How many clubs have actually won the Super League Grand Final since 1994? 4. Fucking 4. You go to the NRL, it's been 10. I was at Atletico. Good. I like Diego Simeone. I like Atletico Madrid because they're the working class club in Madrid. Fuck Real. Fuck Barcelona. Fuck them all. They got government assistance for years. They were in breach of UEFA rules, and UEFA turned a blind eye until recently. So I hope Atletico, do it. I like Diego Simeone. He's my kind of manager when it comes to professional sport. He's a gritty, no nonsense, doesn't give a fuck kind of guy. His players play that way. I like it. I hope Atletico actually win the Champions League. Fuck Real. Fuck Barcelona. Fuck PSG. UEFA, I think Serafin's the right guy to take the organisation forward. I'm not happy with how they've restructured the European club competitions, but it's the right idea to restructure. They've just done it in the wrong way. But I think he's the right guy to clean up the fucking mess that Platini left behind. But I'm in a more of a ranty mood today. A bit more of a ranty mood. How I really feel? Well, let's go back to 1992 and Sky Sports, shall we? Let's have a little history lesson. We were told back in 92 that ticket prices wouldn't go through the roof. It would benefit grassroots football. Well, okay. Right? And, attendances would always be good and every club would be financially viable. How many clubs have gone out of business in British football, gone into administration, or gone out of business altogether in all the leagues, right, since 92? I can name several in Scotland. I can name a whole hatful in England. The fit and proper persons test and the director's test was only brought in after Abramovich and the Glazers had their takeovers of Chelsea and Man United. And if those takeovers were to be attempted today, they will be blocked or should be blocked under the rules. Yet Cellini gets Leeds. He's got a criminal conviction. Abramovich has actually admitted publicly, I'm a crook. The Glazers bought a club with someone else's money and left the club saddled with debt. Man City, yes, you could argue about human rights record in the Middle East. Newcastle, human rights record in the Middle East. Gillette and Hicks, they got done for fraud, the former Liverpool owners. Randy Lerner, he just took money out of Aston Villa. You've got Sahid Khan, there's concerns about corruption within his organisation and dodgy dealings. He attempted to buy Wembley. How I really feel? Football? Dead to me. Absolutely dead to me. Completely. You've got managers going, we're playing too many games, we need to sort out fixture congestion, yet the owners are like, let's play more games. The European Super League, the only reason why that came about, right, is the clubs have run out of money. Bubble was going to burst anyway. COVID sped it up and actually exposed how shocking the financial management of the game has been at the top level. Think what's going on at the lower reaches of the game across Europe. If the top level is broke and has got billions in debt between the 12 Super League clubs, only one of them posted a profit the season before. That was Chelsea because they had a transfer embargo and weren't allowed to sign any new players and had to sell players. So that's why they made a profit when Lampard was manager. Right? Liverpool refused to disclose their earnings. Every other club made a loss. But surely these are global brands that should be making money hand over fist, profit after tax, not losses, profit. They're making massive losses. The owners can class that as a fucking tax write-off because they haven't made a profit that year, so they can write it off against tax. So the tax man doesn't actually get his money, right? So when the players were refusing to take pay cuts or wage deferrals, saying, but we're paying our tax. Yes, but your employers aren't because they're making a loss. So your tax revenue is fuck all in comparison to what these guys should be paying. Then you look into the fact that backhanders have been paid for stadium deals. You look into the fact that there is corruption linking football to governance and actual government. You then have FIFA with their backhanders over decades, which got exposed in 2015. So the trust between the fans and the governing bodies is gone. The FA has been told it's not fit for purpose in regards to sexism, bullying, homophobia, the abuse scandal, kids being abused by coaches, the Mark Sampson mess, right, and the Eni Luco disaster, which he didn't get sacked for. He actually was sacked for having a relationship with one of his players at Bristol. That's another kettle of fish. Then you have rugby union. Professionalism hasn't worked since 1995, and the two big unions that were pushing for it are New Zealand and Australia. Australia's rugby union, Rugby Australia's bankrupt. Israel Folau fucked them over. You had a woman who's never had no previous history in rugby union, only netball, couldn't run the game to save her ass. Super Rugby collapses on itself. They fuck over the Sunwolves. They screw over allowing Argentinians to turn professional for decades. The South African teams, obviously because of COVID, couldn't play. Then they went, fuck it, we're leaving Super Rugby. So Super Rugby collapses. The New Zealand Rugby Union can't afford to pay the centralised contracts, so they've got the 35 cap rule before you can play overseas. But then all their good talent, as soon as they hit 35 caps, goes, I'm playing in France. Got issues in the Six Nations where the CBC, a private equity firm, want to fucking buy a controlling stake, which means it goes off free-to-air TV and behind a fucking paywall, and they'll take money out of the game. Um, the 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 Premier League has sold its soul. British ice hockey, there are issues over arena availability, arena owners going into administration because of COVID, arenas falling down. So a sport that is the fastest growing sport in the UK is basically barely making any money, yet fans want to go to games, want to see the sport be successful. We've got arenas closing down. We've got arenas that have had their doors locked for years. We've got arenas in poor state of repair. We've got local government taking backhanders. Um, then you've got clubs that don't own their stadiums in football. Then the FA have just done the tick box exercise and it doesn't work. The Kick It Out campaign and Lord Ousley, there's concerns over mismanagement of funds in a charity designed to stamp out racism. Then you've got the ECB with the 100 format because they signed a stupid TV deal with Rupert Murdoch and Sky, which is therefore, if you look at it, peak viewership in 2005 Ashes, 24 million. Peak viewership in the World Cup final, 15 million. So there's a net loss of 9 million to 10 million fans over a decade and a half. But apparently that was a successful World Cup. Only one game was on free-to-air fucking TV. The 100 format is going to make a loss for the first 2 to 3 years. No one fucking wants it apart from ECB, right, who are desperate to make some money back. Yet they're going to make a loss on that. They have to go to the government going, please save us. We're losing all this money because we signed a shit TV deal that's actually killing the sport. The county game's in crisis. Regardless of what you make of the Yorkshire situation, the culture is toxic to hell. The test team is shit. Joe Root shouldn't be captain. Ben Stokes should be in prison. How he got away with that is because he was charged for a fray, not, grievous bodily harm with intent. You've got cocaine abuse rife in rugby union, rife in rugby league, rife in cricket. You've got sex scandals and sexual assault allegations against a multitude of football players. You've got, I could go on. Out of all the British athletes on the suspended World Anti-Doping List and the British Anti-Doping List, half of them are Welsh Rugby Union, Welsh Rugby League players, because steroid use and recreational drug use in Welsh Rugby Union and Rugby League is endemic. You then have the fact that the Super League cannot compete with the NRL in quality, so our best fucking players go over there. Couldn't make that up. The TV deal for Rugby League is shit. 10 free-to-air games a year. Yay! It's on Channel 4. A broadcaster that's hemorrhaging money and has lost loads of sports rights over the last 20 years because they can't actually afford to keep them. What else? You've got Major League Baseball over in the US. That's a mess. Yeah, I can see another player strike or another lockout in the next 5 years. You've got the NFL and the NHL with the CTE lawsuit, and there's still people denying that concussion causes brain damage. Who knew? There's concerns about player welfare in the NRL and AFL. There's current and ex-players. Again, it's a culture issue. There's violence against women. Not enough has been done to stamp that out. Cycling, still cyclists are fucking doping. That's a sport with no integrity. You've got the IOC allegations of corruption going back to Nagano in 1998. You've got FIFA, obviously corrupt as hell. The Qatar World Cup should not be taking place. The mess of organising the Rugby League World Cup and the fact it's been delayed by a year, and the RFL going, please give us money, we're broke. We've got 3 different governing bodies for rugby league in this country, or 3 layers of governance. They're all over the place. The Super League's bust. The list could go on. Where do you want me to go? Really? And now we've got the Leicester Tigers doing exactly the same thing as Saracens, but they were smart about it. So they don't get any points deductions. They've ring-fenced the Premiership Rugby Union, which has fucked over the Championship for forever, which is going to cause players to give up the game. The Autumn Internationals are now on Amazon because they weren't classed as Category A sporting events, which have always been on free-to-air TV. So they've been lost to the average fan and the casual fan. You've got Rugby union, the rules are a fucking mess. They're trying to copy rugby league with the goal line dropout and the 50-22 kick, because let's get more kicking in the game. That's pointless and aimless. Scrums are a mess. Player welfare is a fucking mess. You've got where do you want me to go? International football will not go behind a paywall because it's classed as a category A in this country, and ITV and BBC have signed multiple agreements going into the 2030s, which will always be the case. The day that goes behind a paywall, you're having a riot. Just putting it out there. You've got broadcasters that have gone bust in the last 15 years, Setanta being the prime example, ESPN losing it, ITV Sport. You've had 2 attempts at a Premier League pay-per-view system, once on Sky, which lasted a season, and they went, it's not working, fine, we're not going to do it again. And then to try and cover their losses over COVID, we'll try it again. And 86 fans decided to watch Bournemouth Burnley, or West Brom Burnley, officially. Boxing is corrupt as hell. Anything to do with the Hearn family, fuck it off, because they are sleazy. You've got organised criminals who are involved in the drug trade, trying to legitimise their illegal earnings by opening boxing gyms and boxing promotions, with the Kinahan family from Dublin as an example. Using that as an example. I know only the England Autumn Internationals were on Sky. All the others were on BBC or ITV and Channel 4 for Ireland. It was only the Sky had the rights to England after 2000. Partly to do with their Six Nations coverage as well, which they had for 3 years. Then the RFU were like, we're losing money, let's go back on BBC. Yeah, no, the Autumn Internationals, apart from England ones, have always been on free to air until this year. The whole thing is a mess. Whole thing's a mess. And it's the last 2 years. It's the last 2 years where all this has come to a head, where sports mismanagement and the corruption within it has been fully exposed for what it is. And you've got these ultra wealthy organisations going, we can't afford to pay our non-paying staff, so we're going to put them on furlough. But we're not going to tell our players to take pay cuts. No, we can't have that. But the tea lady at the training ground and the club shop staff, we're going to fuck them over, but we're still going to pay Gareth Bale 600 grand a week. That's top for you. How Spurs is that? Can't win any trophies, but we're going to fuck over our non-playing staff. Because the owner's a tax exile and he can fucking afford to pay them. That was the tipping point for me. And then it was up to, I think Birmingham City led the way, and fair play to them. Players were like, we're taking a 50% pay cut. We didn't even have to negotiate. As a group, we went, yep, we're doing it. I think I'm nearly run out of things to rant about. And the only sporting organisation internationally that's going to have any credit out of the last 2 years is the IIHF, the International Ice Hockey Federation. They were the first international sporting body to go, Russia and Belarus, fuck off, we don't want you. You might have some of the best players in the game in international ice hockey. We don't want you. Oh, by the way, that tournament you got next year, we're taking that off you as well. How much of a fallout would there be when wage cuts do come in? Especially when it comes to football, it's not sustainable. There needs to be a salary cap. Unfortunately, the players' union will vote against that. Vote against it. They will vote against a salary cap, not a cap on individual players' wages, but a salary cap. They will vote against it. And it's not just player wages, it's agents' fees, really, and the transfer fees as well. The whole economics of agents, players, and transfers is what's. The transfers are done in instalments, so the whole system is built upon debt. Now, the players, look, I've got no fault with the players getting paid. Okay, a decent wage, because their careers can be notoriously very, very short. Dean Ashton's a prime example. He was done by 25. Okay, and Dean Ashton's a very good commentator now for BBC Radio and goes on Talk Sport, and he does a lot of his media commitments now. He's a prime example of why players should get paid a decent wage, a fair, you know, make your money while you can. Your career can be short. I have no problem with that. It's Mbappe asking for 850,000 a week is what is obscene. Bearing in mind the league minimum salary until the CBA for baseball was $500,000 a year. He wants that more than that in a fucking week. The NHL minimum league salary, right, is 750,000 US dollars, which is basically the equivalent to 1.2 million a year in pounds. NHL players, yeah, no. I love ice hockey. I really do. The injuries they sustain and they play through. They've played through punctured lungs. They have played through ruptured spleens. They have played through broken jaws, like fractured skulls, ruptured knee ligaments. Mario Lemieux couldn't even tie his own laces on his skates. He had to stand on intercontinental flights and international flights between Pittsburgh and Canada and the east and west coast for 5 hours because sitting down meant his legs would go numb. He also played whilst going through cancer treatment. So football players, overpaid. Sorry. The highest salary in the NRL is 1.2 million Australian dollars, which equivalates right now to about 750 to 800,000 pounds. I think per year. Per year, not a week, a year. Mbappe wants 850,000 euros a week to stay at PSG. Fuck off. He's not that good. He's decent. He's not that good. I think Messi was on like 600,000 a week, something like that. Bale, sorry, they're not that good. They're not that important. They should not be earning in a week what it would take me 2 lifetimes of working at my job to earn. Not going to happen in no world. If that was a year, I'm happy with that. They got earned that in a year. I accept that. That's a fucking good wage. Fair play to you, lad. Your career's short. Make some good, solid investments. When you retire, you've got a property portfolio. You've got some stocks and shares. You've got into training for a new career. You know, be a structural engineer. Be a plumber. It doesn't bother me. What they're earning a week, they should earn in a year. That's my opinion. And the Neymar transfer for me was sickening. I could buy a Pacific Nation for that. It's wrong. The whole thing is wrong. Wait till you see what LeBron James is on, then you'll be, what the fuck? Yeah, that's a what the fuck moment. Alexis Sanchez, his peak contract at Man United was 34 million a year before bonuses. That's not including third-party payments. Yeah, let that sink in. Let that sink in. The youngest long-staff brother is on 800 quid a week. Now, for me, that is acceptable for a player his age. I think the older brother's on like £2,000 a week on their old contracts. That to me fair. I can deal with 4 times my monthly salary for their salary. I can deal with that. You know, it's when they do complain. Oh, it's like when Danny Rose was like, "I earn 50 grand a week. That's not enough." What the fuck are you spending all that money on? In 2 weeks after tax, you earn 50 grand, 50% tax rate. What the hell is he spending 100 grand a month on after tax? What the fuck is he spending that money on? He must be on a lot of cocaine and a lot of prostitutes because even Charlie Sheen was not spending that kind of money when he was having his mental breakdown in 2009, 2010, when he was winning. That is a ridiculous amount of money. You know, when you've got players going 50 grand a week's not enough for me to live on, I want 100. Fuck off, you entitled little shit. It just pisses me off. I don't mind them getting 50 grand a week, and then going, no, I'm actually pretty happy with that. You know, I'll just my next contract, I'll sign a hometown discount, and I'll give you 20% back. Plenty of players do that, but when you get those players going, I'm not paid enough, I want to get paid more. Fuck off. You don't like it, go somewhere else. Pisses me right off. And the agents' fees, there's no regulation there, which is why Chelsea, West Ham, and Newcastle. Remember that back in 2017? We're embroiled in that tax fraud investigation. It was a French led investigation over some of the transfers, like Papi Cisse and Demba Ba, for example. And club offices were raided, and clubs were cooperating with the authorities. Oh, look, Chelsea in the news, and Newcastle in the news again for being dodgy. Who knew? Who knew? Oh, pretend to be shocked. Really? You can tell my sarcasm has reached a point now where I'm so so much cynicism about all this. Oh, Riola needs to just he, ugh, he's protected by some very interesting people. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got links to organised crime. Um, absolutely. There's no. Don't get me wrong. There's some very good player agents and sports agencies out there that do look after their clients, and they only get to talk to their clients when there's a contract renewal. Their client goes, I'm up for a new contract, or there's some transfer interest. Yep, we've heard some transfer interest. Let's see what we can do. Let's get you a fair deal. Let's get you sorted out in a new house. If right, blah 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 blah, blah. Right. And it's the same in Australia. There's a guy, Moses is his name, and he's been deregistered as a player agent. Right. And I love my rugby league, right? And Paul Kent on ARL 360 was like, off the record, talking to a player agent. How often do you see a client? Oh, my favourite client, I only see him once every 3 years when he's doing a contract renewal, or he's off. He's a free agent. He's looking for a club. I love. It's brilliant. I don't have to work too hard. I'm in the office. He can phone me anytime. He only phones me up when he wants to sign a new contract, and he's in contract negotiations. Bang, done. Ask how I'm doing. Da, 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 da. That's our relationship. I get my fee, and I can focus on my other clients. There are some really good sports agents out there who are very above board, very transparent, very open, very honest. Some good sports agencies, and again, above board, really prim and proper, do it by the book, very open, transparent with their dealings with their clients, their sports stars, and maybe the sponsorship contract or the tournament or whatever they're doing. Open, honest, and transparent. And then you've got Riola, who is a crook, quite frankly. And these prim and proper agents, of which the majority are, I'm not saying all agents are crooks, saying we're not regulated, we've been pushing for regulation, we need to have more transparency, and there are those in our industry who make us look all like criminals when we're not. We work very hard to get good deals for our clients and the people employing them, make sure it's fair for both parties, because guess what? The clubs have agents as well to sign them sponsorship deals and to contact the intermediaries. So even the clubs have agents, and they will represent parties when it comes to contract negotiations. And they go, yes, we're above board, we try hard. And then Riola and Mendes and Moses and all these other agents who are dodgy bring the industry down because there's no fucking regulation. And these player agents that are above board, clean, transparent, work hard, and the player agent and the sports agencies that are really, sports management companies that are again prim and proper, have been screaming out for regulation for years. They've been telling governments we need to be regulated. We need to have proper rules in place where we're transparent. The whole industry is transparent, and there isn't. And they are begging for it because their reputation has been dragged through the mud because of Riola, because of Mendes, because this guy Moses I think his name is Isaac Moses in Australia, and there are others who are doing these dodgy dealings and breaching contracts and cutting corners and taking backhanders, and it brings the whole industry into disrepute. Same with football ownership. I'm not saying every owner is bad. There are some very, very good owners out there. Leicester City is a prime example for me of a good owner. He may be foreign, but he cares about the community. He's invested heavily. Hasn't spent wildly. Obviously, his father tragically passed away, and he has to come into the limelight. He's a very reserved, family kind of guy. And then you've got Exeter City as well, where the fans have a stake in running the club, and you have these clubs that are well run, that are respectful, that are for the community, by the community, and then you have others like the Glazers, FSG, Fenway Sports Group. You have, Sullivan and Gold, all this kind of crap, and you're like, really, 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 and we end up where we are. And You know, I yeah, I'm running out of things to rant about now. I just it pisses me off because this has been an issue for years. This is not a problem that happened overnight. The issue with agents' fees and the transparency of the system and their involvement within professional sport has been an issue for a long time, very long time. This is not something that's happened in the last year or so. This is 2, 3 decades of a weak, badly regulated system. And then you've got the really good agents and the good sports agencies who are advocating for a clean, transparent, regulated system, and nothing is being done. And so I don't know where we go from here, but until various sporting governing bodies, I don't think necessarily government necessarily, but you other industries are regulated and have to abide by regulations, right? Until there's a register for player agents and player agencies through all the various international and national sporting leagues of a professional level, until there is an agents register and all the various international sports and international governing bodies come together and say, right, if you're not on this register, you cannot represent. If you are blacklisted from this, it's like, check a trade when you want to hire a tradesman to fix your house, and Trustpilot, things like that, where you are on that list as you get 5 stars. And there's a rating system or a checker trade if you're not check safe. All these various CSCS card, all these various trade regulatory things that make sure you and I, as the workers, are safe and the public are safe. If you are not on that list and you're not approved, you cannot represent. Until there is that kind of system in place, dodgy player agents will rip off their clients, which is a well-known fact as well that has happened. That um, Same with musicians as well; they've been ripped off, and actors have been ripped off by their agents. This is a known thing. Until there is a transparent system where a sports league can go to a player and question a transfer or a contract. Is your agent on the list? Is he on the approved list? He's not. Or are your agents on the approved list? They're not. I'm sorry, but we have to say your contract is in breach of league rules. There you go. Problem solved. Have a list system where if you are not on the list, if you're not approved as an agent or an agency, you cannot represent. It's the same with the doctor's register, being registered to be a doctor, and a lawyer. If you are debarred as a lawyer, you cannot stand up in court and represent a client. If you are struck off the medical register, you cannot practice as a doctor. Until there is that kind of register, that kind of, okay, this guy, no black marks against his name, she's a good player agent, that's a good agency, they're all good, fine, that deal was good, it's transparent, goes through. That to me is what needs to happen is an agents list and an agents accreditation. Because when Lewis Hamilton started driving from McLaren, his dad was his agent and his advisor, and then Lewis Hamilton fired him, and that was the moment Lewis Hamilton became a cunt. When Lewis Hamilton was being advised and his dad was his agent, Lewis Hamilton was a likable, talented young lad. Now he's a talented cunt. He may be one of the best motor racing drivers in the world. Doesn't make him a likable character, and he fired his dad. So tells you all you need to know, really. But yeah, there needs to be a registered agents register, as in approved agents can represent sports clients, be it teams, sports championships, sponsors, and players. No, I have not seen the place that England. Oh God, why am I not surprised? Again, money laundering, probably. Um, why am I not surprised? There's not even enough hotel accommodation in Qatar for the World Cup for all the journalists, let alone the players and the fans. Jesus. But I think I'm close to rant over at this point. I think this has been building for a while. Now I could quite happily go on without swearing on a sports podcast, and I could rant for hours. True. I think you would have to get certain accreditations and certain qualifications. So you would have to pass certain kind of test, something. Every industry has a regulatory body where, like, chartered surveyor, doctors, lawyers, all the various trades, you've got to have all your accreditation to be, on sites, gas check safe, all these kind of things. Um, it's a very badly regulated industry. Um, there are ways to get accreditation, basically, that you could put in place. Certain tests you have to take, certain various things they could put in place. Chartered accountants, you can be banned from being an accountant. If you're a bankrupt, you can't be a chartered accountant. Who knew? If you're struck off the doctor's register, the medical practices register, the nurses and doctors, you cannot practice medicine. Um, it's the same with a boxing license. If you are barred from holding a boxing license, you cannot practice boxing, basically. So I do believe, yes, agent-wise, there should be some kind of industry register where if you're on it, you can represent. If you're barred from it for whatever reason, you cannot represent the client because that's the last legal contracts there, and so it will go under the same process as a legal register of being on the bar. Once you're debarred as a lawyer, and you cannot practice law. Um, the ironic thing is Harry Kane is an Arsenal fan. You couldn't make that up, but he is. Um, he was agitating for a move over the last year and a half. He has been agitating for a move. I don't know what assurances have been given to Harry Kane by Daniel Levy and the club board, but um, I'm not sure he's going to be there much longer. Whether Conte goes, we need a change completely, because Conte has basically said the team isn't good enough. The players aren't putting the effort in. I can't fix this problem unless I'm allowed to fix the problem. Conte's basically said either I get to fix the problems or I'm done. He's basically said sack me or let me fix the problem. And I think Spurs will probably sack him than fix the squad issues. You think anything? What's the counter Olymp? What's that question about? What's that in relation to? In regards to the MP referring to the police? Um, in regards to what? In regards to what there? Um, uh, I don't know exactly what incident you're on about. Um, oh, the Josh Taylor fight. I do. I don't know the exact what's been referred to the police, unless there's some suspicious betting patterns or something happening behind the scenes with the promotion or something. I just honestly, the corruption in boxing. Look, cor- corruption in boxing is nothing new. Nothing's going to change. We all know that. Let's not believe it's going to change. There's been corruption at the Olympics and the boxing competitions there. There's corruption in professional boxing. Nothing's going to change. Um, unless there's actual proof that Josh Taylor's camp paid bribes, then in that case, they've got to look at. There would probably be suspicious betting patterns that will be investigated. If anything, if there's any suspicious betting patterns on that fight, that's where an investigation will start, and then you can build a case. It's very, very difficult to prove bribes have been paid unless you actually get bank details and the fraud squad gets involved, which is City of Westminster Police, City of London Police. The only way I would think there'll be an avenue of investigation is if there was irregular betting patterns. If there's nothing there, then you have to look at irregular bank deposits. And in that case, if there is the fight contract will be signed for the fight purse between the two fighters and their camps, their promoters. So each promoter takes a cut. So their agent, their promoter, the actual promoter of the fight, right? Each boxer will get his prize purse. Then their agent and their representatives get paid out of that purse as well. Their trainers, their sponsors, all that kind of thing. And that's all agreed in the contract. So if there's anything extra on top of that, that's when you can go, there's a suspicious amount of money. The Boxing Board of Classification supplies the judges, and it depends on if it's WBO, IBF, or the Boxing Federation supply the judges if it's a unification fight, and then they get paid a salary to be there and a match fee. If there's anything above and beyond that, that's when you can go as a suspicious bank deposit, and then it's a fraud investigation and a corruption investigation and a bribery investigation, and that's where you need a financial unit such as City of London Police to get involved. They are very difficult cases to prove unless you've got basically blindingly obvious evidence of a brown paper envelope with 20 grand worth of cash in, for example. Those kind of cases are really hard to prove. I believe Jack. Well, I don't know. Then I don't follow boxing enough anymore to really. I've got no interest in boxing anymore. It's all dodgy to me. I'm that cynical. There's too much corruption within the sport. A lot of that's been highlighted by a lot of fighters and trainers over the years. We know organised crimes involved with boxing in laundering money through opening boxing gyms and training centres and boxing agents. In regards to corruption in boxing, it's nothing new. It's been going on for years, years and years and years and years. There's been some dodgy points decisions. The British Boxing Board of Classification is a joke, absolute joke. I'm not even. I know people within the sport, fighters, trainers, promoters, who are again clean and honest, have come out and said, "Yeah, we have a lot of suspicions about corruption within the British Board of Boxing Classification, British Boxing Board of Control, sorry." And there's been a lot of murmurings about corruption within the organisation at a national level for quite some time. But corruption in boxing there's been a whole host of current and ex-fighters, trainers, promoters, boxing agents, so people who represent their fighter saying, "Look, right, okay, I'm your agent. I'm going to try and get you the best sponsorship deal, the best, I'm, try and get you contracts." There's been a lot of people saying, and these are the ones who are above board. These are not the transparent, open ones, as I say, the sporting agents and all that who are above board and transparent. They've been pushing for reform within boxing for years. We know organised crime with the Kinahan crime syndicates involved with the boxing gym in Marbella and Dubai and all that. We know there's dirty money in the sport. There has been for decades. It ain't going to change. Sorry. Unless a real high-profile fighter is actually implicated and then charged, and a high-profile agent or a high-profile gym owner or a high-profile promoter is actually taken to task over corruption, it's nothing's going to change. Oh God, yeah. Any fight in the US to me is suspicious. And until a high-profile agent or a high-profile promoter is implicated actually implicated and there's evidence to implicate corruption and bribery, and then you can build a case, nothing's going to change. It will only change when a high profile personality within the sport, and I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie Hearn is that high profile personality, to be honest, because anywhere he goes, corruption and fixing, be it snooker, darts, boxing, MMA, follows him like a rash, follows him like syphilis. Once you got it, you've got it. Until someone of that caliber and that high profile within the sport is implicated in a corruption scandal and charges are brought and filed by a district attorney's office in America or the CPS here, and police forces are actively investigating where the dirty money goes, actively, and linking it in, nothing is going to change. The moment that happens, more people who are honest within the sport will come forward and give evidence, because until that dodgy organised crime corruption link is broken, until that happens, nothing will fucking change. I have heard of Fight Disciples. I haven't watched any of their videos, but I have heard of them. I might decide to give it a look in at some point. But as I say, until the authorities can actively get enough evidence to open an investigation, and until a high profile members within boxing's inner circle are actually implicated and or charged, nothing is going to change. Nothing. Until they stop the stem of dirty money within the sport, much like football, much like cricket, with the corruption in cricket, snooker, until a high profile participant, so a snooker player, a boxer, an MMA fighter, a promoter, an agent, an administrator, until someone very, very high profile or a group of high profile people are implicated in a corruption scandal and it's so big that it makes global news, nothing is going to change. And there are enough fighters and there are enough agents and there are enough promoters who have been saying for years, Barry McGuigan's been coming up for years saying, this is wrong. There is corruption and criminality within the sport. And it's not just the judges being bribed off, there are organised criminals laundering their money. Nothing is going to change until a high profile board member, high profile boxer, agent, promoter, until high profile people are arrested and charged for a variety of offences, nothing's going to change. We've seen it in football, we've seen it in snooker, we've seen it in cricket. Hansi Cronje in cricket, for example, you couldn't make that up. Darling of a nation, post-apartheid South Africa, captain of the cricket team, much like captain of the Springboks, right? MTK Global, that's the one. But they're still going. They're going out of Dubai. So America has now legalized sports gambling. It's up to each individual state to give out gambling licenses, and up to each individual state to legislature to enact the federal law. It's the same here. The gambling companies have red flags. So if there are suspicious betting patterns, the financial police of the City of London will get notified. The authorities will get notified. So in America, it'll be the FBI. Here, it's the City of London. In Australia, there's a dedicated task force. They will be. And the thing is, the only police force in the world is the Australian Federal Police that has a dedicated sports corruption unit. So when the City of London Police get a tip off about sports corruption, they're on a hotline to Canberra in Australia going, we've got a tip off. What advice would you give us for this investigation? We believe this and that. And they then send a specialist officer over to the jurisdiction that has phoned them up, going, okay, this is what you got to look for. This is the training we've had. This is da 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 da. So the fact there's only one dedicated police force in the world, the Federal Police of Australia, that has a dedicated anti-sport corruption unit that looks at everything from organised crime laundering money through to match fixing scandals, until more countries have dedicated police units trying to root out organised crime and corruption in sport, it will continue. So anytime there is any kind of suspicious betting pattern and an investigation is being launched into corruption, the Australian Federal Police in Canberra, their head office, gets a phone call. They will send out a dedicated team or individual officer or a team of officers. Go out. Oh yeah, absolutely. But as I say, until a high-profile agent, high-profile promoter, a high-profile boxer, a high-profile administrator gets caught, spills the beans, and opens up all the dodgy dealings, nothing's going to change. And we as fans have known for years. Journalists have known for years. But because the organised criminals have such a stake in professional boxing and fixing it, and such a stake in laundering their money through professional sport, the risks to a whistleblower are so dangerous, so dangerous. The risks are too high. Until enough people are brave enough to go to the authorities in enough numbers, it's going to continue. And until that day happens, the risks to the safety of those whistleblowers is too high, far too high. I've watched enough documentaries. I've seen enough interviews with ex-gangsters who've, gone on the straight and narrow. Investigative journalists who've been brave enough to go undercover with the criminal syndicates who fix sport and have links to killing people, because the criminal syndicates are the nice criminals, in the sense that they just do all the fixing. They manipulate results. They pay the bribes. They've got the nasty guys, the guns, the sledgehammers, the torture techniques, the kneecapping, who intimidate witnesses, who intimidate when the player goes, no, I want to back out of this dodgy deal. They send someone around to threaten him or his family to go, you're going to score that own goal. You're going to, miss that shot. You're going to bowl an over, or we're going to hurt you. But yeah, no, there does need to be change, and there's got to be some very brave people speaking out. And I don't know, but I don't watch boxing anymore. Since the explosion of international TV broadcast deals and the explosion of excessive amounts of money in professional sport in the last 30 years, corruption scandals have gone through the roof. It's not a new trend. This is a trend that's been going on for 20, 30 years. And it's to do with the satellite TV money. It's to do with the increased wages at the top end. So the average player, and the lower ranked players and the lower level players who are on, let's say, league minimum salaries in North America, for example, or they're in the lower levels of the sport, whatever, the individual or team sports, where they're only getting paid not much more than what I'm getting paid. They're going to be tempted. Young players who are on their entry level contracts, so there are actually rules in place so you can't get paid more than a certain amount. They are going to be tempted to earn some extra cash. They are. And it's been proven in cricket. Young players have been manipulated and pressured into fixing and spot fixing and taking bribes because they're not paid enough at the bottom in the early years of their career. They're on very poor contracts, basically, in real terms. And they are easy prey because they're not on the superstar salary. They're not earning great money. And they are easy prey for the criminals to manipulate. And they can be super talented, but they've just broken through into the first team. They're not on a lot of money. And they know their careers are going to be short. They need to make as much money as possible. And They are young, naive, scared. Some of them, they really are under a lot of pressure. Um, they might have a young family. They might have, a sick parent, medical costs, any number of reasons. Um, yeah, I've heard tales, especially in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and the West Indies, of young players being approached um, by people with bags of cash, saying, "You're a you're a batsman, get run out. Deliberately get run out. Call a run, get run out. Roughly between over 10 and over 50. Make it happen. You're a bowler. You're a fast bowler. Bowl a couple of no balls. I want two no balls in your third over." Yeah, that happens. I mean, even Alex Stewart, towards the end of his career, was approached by a guy with about 60 grand in a duffel bag, going, "I want you to fix a match for me." And at first, the guy was like, "Oh, you're Alex Stewart. I'm a businessman. I want to, I've got a business opportunity for you. I want to do some public." He tried to lure him in with some. He do some public speaking for me. I want to, uh, you know, from Indian background, get the young kids why you got into cricket, why you love the sport, da, da, da. And then he was like, "I want to show you something quick. Here's 60 grand. Fix a match for me." It does. It's not surprised it happens. There have been match fixing. There have been team owners who've been deregistered. Sri Sant, Indian fast bowlers in prison for fixing. Um, it already has happened. Um, to be fair, the England Test team's just shit. I think they are just generally just shit. But yes, English players. I think there was one young English player playing for Essex who he went to prison for fixing. He got like a 3 month sentence. He served 3 months. I think he got a 9 month sentence, but you do like a 30-year sentence, good behaviour. Um, and again, he was on a low salary, finding his way in the game, not on a centralised contract, so he's on county cricket salary. And yeah, he needed money basically. Career is short. Need to make as much money as possible. Guy approached him, and he was like, "Okay." And it's the same in tennis. Tennis is rife with it. Snooker's rife with it, especially in the mid to lower rankings. Um, yeah. So we've gone from breach of the Tigers' salary cap breach to match fixing in cricket. It's cheating and cheating. It's cheating for financial gain, and it's cheating to manipulate the salary cap so you can put a better team on the field than you should be allowed to. Um, and yeah, it's sad that basically this entire live stream is A, be me ranting, and B, nothing but depressing topics. Instead of, look at this player, he's broken through, he scored a hat trick. Talking about a young player coming through, um, and bursting through, and look at this guy, he's going to be a superstar. It's corruption, 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 corruption. That's all we've spoken about all night, is just corruption. And it saddens me that that's the topic of conversation this evening, is basically being corruption and nothing else. And that's what saddens me. Um, Cricket is one of those sports that, yeah, the Hansi Cronje, revelations in the late 90s, I think, is where people woke up. People woke up. Um, and there was a couple of dodgy bookmakers that approached a couple of English and Aussie players during an Ashes series and asked questions about the wicket for betting purposes. And players, being naive, were like, okay. But when Hansi Cronje was caught on tape during a police investigation in India into organised crime, they've got the wiretap in place. The guy's sitting in the van, literally sitting in the van, and he's just, I mean, hang on a second. That's Hansi Cronje. And because India is cricket mad, that's Hansi Cronje. That's the South African captain, because South Africa were touring India at the time. And he sat there and he phoned his boss, got his, police chief down there. That's Hansi Cronje. He's on tape. They went to the courthouse. They built a case because the criminals they're investigating were not only fixing cricket matches, they were laundering money, contract killing, drug smuggling, prostitution rings, you name it. Proper mafioso type, hustling, protection rackets. They were building a case on organised criminals doing organised criminal things. They were not building a case on match fixing. Hansi Cronje is in a hotel room. In the hotel room, they have bugged having a meeting with one of the guys they are wiretapping. And the guy, I watched the documentary. The guy was the police officer was in disbelief. He was like, "That's Hansi Cronje." Turns up the volume, gets his chief inspector down, gets the whole bloody unit down, and he does say he got his whole police unit down. They're sat in their little minivan, and he takes the headphones out and just plays it live. And because in Indian civil service you have to speak English as part of your entry exam, you have to have a decent command. They're listening to this conversation in English, and it was so damning that when Hansi Cronje denied to the world, it's when that recording got played in the South African Parliament, where he was giving evidence saying, I'm not fixing," and then it got played because they were building a criminal case against an organised criminal syndicate in, I think, Mumbai. I think it was Mumbai. It was a criminal mafia, kind of Indian mafia. They weren't investigating cricket corruption. They were investigating a racketeering ring or something to do with that. And they had a federal warrant, a high court warrant, to allow this wiretap. That was the moment that it exposed the organised criminals were moving drugs, guns, prostitutes, stolen goods, racketeering to we'll get involved in corrupt sports dealings and laundering money through. That's the moment that sports corruption came on the world stage. We've heard of like a few dodgy, pay the referee off so we get some favourable decisions by a team owner. Until that point, that was the moment that organised criminals basically, to the world's consciousness, even though various mafia organisations had been intimidating people and fixing things for betting purposes and at amateur level and collegiate level in the US for decades, that was the moment where A, it was seen as now fashionable for organised criminals to do it that way. B, that was the moment the wider public finally knew, because this has been going on for years, that organised criminal syndicates had been fixing matches and fixing boxing. It was sort of known, but it had never been proven. That was the moment on tape that the whole veneer of sports corruption was blown open. That organised criminal syndicates, mafias, criminal gangs were making money with their drug sales and making money with their arms sales and prostitution rings and racketeering. And then with that money they have just made, they're pumping it into fixing sporting events with dodgy bets and then tripling, quadrupling their profits. That's ridiculous. I know that a player is out injured for the second test. I think it is Mark Wood, the fast bowler, is out for the second test. No, he's back in apparently. But the Hansi Cronje, that was the watershed moment for sports corruption. And then you had the NBA betting scandal with the referee in 2008. And again, organised crime was implicated in that as well. Although he was the one who ended up going to prison. He, off the record, said, no, there were members of organised criminal syndicates also actively involved in fixing matches in the NBA and fixing decisions. And, so the Hansi Cronje and the NBA betting scandals was where the watershed moment. They're the watershed moments in professional sports corruption, where organised criminals were actively involved in the corruption rather than a team owner just going, let's give the referee a brown envelope saying, just give us some favourable decisions tonight. And overzealous, so we're now talking about legitimate, organised criminals with their ill-gotten gains, pumping the money they've made from their other criminal enterprises into sport to manipulate for betting purposes, be it legal betting, where they've just gone, okay, we'll all bet on the 3-1, right? Because that's highly unlikely, but we know it's going to be a 3-1 in this football match, or this test match is going to go, an innings and 57 runs. We'll bet on that outcome because the odds are like 1,000 to 1, so you already maximise your profits. That was the moment. The second moment was the NBA betting scandal, and you've had Operation Slapshot, which in the NHL in 2006, which involved the Gambino crime family. Only two people went to prison for that, but the FBI got involved in that. And all these scandals have happened post 1992. Too much money in professional sport. Too much money. But anyway, I'm gonna leave that there. It has been one of the more depressing live streams, I think, in my point of view. Instead of talking about, a superstar player breaking through a really great performance by a young player, where we're talking about sports corruption, I think a bit of both. I do believe there are refs who are in someone's pocket, and the refereeing standard in general raises a lot of questions. We used to be the envy of the footballing world when it came to officiating. We're not anymore. So I do believe, I honestly believe there's a possibility that yes, there is some corruption in the refereeing, and the refereeing standards generally fallen because look at the abuse referees get at the lower levels of the game. There's not enough officials within the game. Referees are getting overworked, which then leads to a decline in performance. And there are less referees now than what there were 10 years ago. And referees are retiring. They've kind of had enough. So, yes, I honestly believe that there is an issue. I'm not naive to think it's not happening. I believe there's a high chance of it happening. I'm not saying it is, but I'm not naive to think it doesn't. No. That's meant to be for entertainment reasons. That's the wrong way to give us an entertaining product. Really. That's the wrong way to get an entertaining product. So that's my opinion on that. I don't know. I'm not naive to think it doesn't happen. We know it has happened before where referees and linesmen have been approached and intimidated to get the result that a person wants. We know it's happened. It's happened in Turkey. It's happened in Germany. It's happened in Italy. It's happened in Greece. Wouldn't surprise me if it's happening here. Quite frankly. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for all your questions. I know. Okay. Apparently, I'm a stupid bearded prick. Okay. Wow, that means you have subscribed to the channel for more than 5 minutes just to call me a stupid bearded prick. Wow. Okay then. Wow. You must really, really be. That means he has subscribed to the channel for more than 5 minutes in order to leave a comment because I've changed the rules on live stream. And apparently I'm a stupid bearded prick. Wow, that's a new one. I've heard of many insults. Nobody called a stupid bearded prick, but Yeah, he's inventive. I'll give him that. I'll give him that. Well, this is why I changed the way the live streams work to give you guys, the moderators, less hassle. To be honest, because the amount of trolls we were getting on every live stream just got frustrating. And so I changed. You had to be subscribed for a certain period of time. You obviously had to minimum waiting time between comments. It happens. United going to the Champions League. I mean, that would make my day. That'd be another trophy this season for United as well as Tottenham. And they want to be part of the European Super League. They can't even win domestic trophies, let alone European ones. Oh, that'd be a miracle if they score an equaliser. I think they had their good fortune in Spurs at the weekend with the Ronaldo hat trick to get them out of trouble. And he hasn't played well this season, so. And there's been question marks um, over selection and all that. Right, let's. Huh. Let's call that. Don't worry, we're going to make sure he's. He's given. It's the fact that people actually like. What's the score and equalise? At the end of the day, like Man United, the fact they got this far in the Champions League with what's happened, the mess they've made of this season, um, amazes me. And let's have a look. Let's see what they're saying. How long's left? Ooh. Well, if Man United score, it goes to extra time and penalties because of the away goals rule. At the moment, they're going out because they need to score twice to go through. Benfica are leading Ajax 3-2 in aggregate. Oh, there's no away goals rule this year. Well, that's cool. Yeah, no, United need to score. Even with the old away goals rule, they would have to score twice to go through anyway. Well, Oblak's in goal, so yeah, that's gonna be fun, isn't it? Yeah, Benfica are beating Ajax 3-2. There's 4 minutes to go, and that was when was that? Oh, not this season. They might scrap that permanently. It's like replays in the FA Cup. That might be a permanent scrappage. We may never see replays in the FA Cup ever again. That's. I think United are done there. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. I personally think they don't bring back the away goals rule. I think that's they brought that in because of like empty stadiums um, and because of the COVID pandemic. I think fans don't want the away goals rule. Apparently, I've got 878 subscribers now. What? I've gained 4 subscribers somehow. Don't know how. I I I think the away goals rule doesn't get brought back. I think. Oh no, we're not talking about corruption. It's amazing. But no, fans were unhappy with the away goals rule. It was a flawed. It was a flawed rule. I understand why they brought it in. I do to a certain extent. At the same time, it was an outdated principle. Um, And it's the same with the FA Cup replay, although I do like the old FA Cup replay with the lower league side, or the underdog earns that replay against the big team, and it's a cash win for them. But I think with the World Cup positioning when it is, and the disruption to next season anyway, I think the FA Cup replay could be a permanent thing of the past, which is a shame because sometimes the replay is better than the original game. And I think the away goals rule, I don't think UEFA bring that back after the World Cup. I don't think they bring it back. The only reason why they suspended the use of it was because in response to the COVID pandemic, because of lack of fans in stadiums, so the home team away team advantage kind of thing was negated. And even with the away goals rule, United would still have to score twice to go through on the night. Rather than go to penalties, they would have to score twice anyway, even under the old rule. But it would, without the away goals rule, you wouldn't have nights that Middlesbrough had in the old UEFA Cup 2006. Without the old, see, that was the joy that kind of brought. They had to because they kept conceding. They had to score 5 more. United fans showing their lack of class again. That's the second troll I've had to get rid of. And I bet it's the same guy who's got multiple accounts. Apparently, I dribble more than Kane. At least I can speak a coherent sentence, unlike Harry Kane. Harry Kane, I need to translate it for him. I think for the next live stream, I'm going to have to change the rules yet again. And you have to be subscribed for half an hour before you can comment. Because, God, these guys are consistent, I tell you. But yeah, well, if you got a guy, you got a guy. The fact United fans are chucking missiles at Simeone, the club's going to get a fine for that. They'll get a fine for that, no doubt. Classless by the United fans. They'll get a fine. Who do you want for left back for England next week since Shaw and Chilwell are out? Oh, that's a difficult one. I mean, Trippier, if he's fit. Trippier can play in that position. Seriously, you really are persistent. It's the same guy coming up with multiple accounts. Trolling now. Honestly, if I think UEFA will fine United for crowd disorder. The FA might fine them as well. They'll get a fine and have a section, and they might be forced to play a game behind closed doors. They'll just get a fine. I mean that. I just it means United are struggling on the field anyway. They don't need their fans misbehaving, adding further problems to the situation. It doesn't cover the club in any glory. I would go for Kieran Trippier if he's fit, simply because he can cover that position on an emergency basis. He might be. He might be. This is pitiful. This guy. This guy's just coming up with multiple accounts now. Yeah, I would go with Trippier on a short term emergency basis because he can cover that position. I know we need a proper left back, but on a short term short term needs must. He has played there before. He can play either side. We could put a right back in that position, like Alexander Arnold. So I would say, yeah, you could use Alexander Arnold. You can cut in his right foot. You can use Trippier. He's 2-footed. You can go as well. I'm trying to deal with trolls, Mr. Barron. There, we've got a lot of. Chilwell might not go to the World Cup. So need to get another in now. True. True. That is true. Yeah. At the end of the day, there are some good young up and coming players that could deserve a run out in the game. At the same time, I would rather have an experienced player on the pitch for a one-off game and just get through the match. And if that means putting Trippier or Trent Alexander-Arnold playing on the other side, they can cut in. Alexander-Arnold's played there as well for Liverpool. Trippier's played there for Tottenham back in the day, for Hull back in the day, for England before. So, but if you want to go with a younger player, that's a fair shout. I think you might. Is it Lewis Dunk plays for Brighton? Can play on the left side. But as they are friendlies, you could go with the inexperienced, give them a run out, see how they fit in with the combinations and the system. Give them some international experience. At the same time, if you want to say this is going to be our squad going forward for this World Cup, you could absolutely put keep Trippier or Trent Alexander-Arnold in there because in the World Cup they may have to play out of position because of injury or suspension. So that's a good bit of tactical nous with an experienced player, trying them in a different role because you're going to have to cover injuries and suspension and most likely COVID as well with expanded squads. So you could quite easily put an experienced player in a cover position to see how they do on the other side. So Trippier can play both sides. And that's where you want that squad depth, if you understand what I'm saying. You want that squad depth there. I know it's not everyone's. You definitely got those up and coming centre backs, and they've also played in the right and left back channels as well. So for an emergency measure, this would be good practice for Southgate when it comes to if they have to play out of position in the tournament, see how they do for a 90-minute run out or a 45-minute run out at left back or at centre back. Play them maybe a sensitive defensive midfielder if you want to protect Henderson's minutes because he's had a few injuries. Declan Rice could do it. Ironically, Declan Rice could actually do it. He can play. He can cover so many positions for West Ham. So this is an opportunity for the team to experiment. If you have to have cover in positions and you have to have that kind of protection. If there is an injury or if there is a suspension or if there is extra time, you've got just put fresh legs on the field for a tactical change. So there's multiple options, whether you go with a senior player like Trippier or a younger player like Guhi or Kilman and try them out and experiment. Because sometimes it has worked where you put a centre back or a left centre back, actually a left back or a right centre back as right back. Look at Kyle Walker at Man City; he can cover the centre back and the right back position, whether you go he's good or bad or not. So there is that opportunity to experiment with your defensive lineup, have a bit more of a defensive-minded lineup, a bit more height as well from corners and free kicks and set plays going forward and in defence. Could the attacking ability in the air protect Pickford, who's not good commanding his box. You could use that experiment That is a fair experiment to work with. But there's a lot of options, which we haven't had for a long time, and in the last 4 or 5 years, we've suddenly got these options which we didn't have before. So we've definitely got more squad depth. We definitely have, you know, up and coming options, and there are players who were in the Euros final, for example, or have been around the squad that are out of form. And if Kilman is left-footed, just play him slightly out of position in a more defensive-minded left-back role to cover that. And you can experiment if there is like an injury when you have to push a centre-back out the left or right-back channel. It's a good way to experiment and prepare yourself for the eventuality come the World Cup, come the Nations League games in the summer. If there are injuries in game or there is a sending off, you can experiment by moving that player into another channel and getting them prepared, for any eventualities, cover those issues that may or may not be. So yeah. Anyway, thanks for the trolls for ruining the live stream and just posting utter crap. Which is just so frustrating, absolutely so frustrating. I don't even have Snapchat, so that's what makes me laugh. But they've helped the subscriber count and they've helped the view count, which ironically helps the channel. It pisses me off. So I'm gonna have to change the live stream settings yet again. The simple fact that yeah, I know I just did it off because of what's happened with Chelsea and what's happening with with uh, with the Leicester Tigers. A lot's happened, and the situation with so many sports stories right now is ridiculous. But thank you very much, obviously, for your questions. Pity about the trolls yet again. It seems to happen all the time. That's why I changed the live stream settings, but it hasn't deterred them. They are persistent. So yeah, we will see you next time. Thank you very much for your questions. I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon. Another one, really? Go fill your own wang, you twat. Jesus, I get tired of this. Right.